I don't like to tell people this because it can be really intimidating. In order to overcome these types of injuries, you literally have to become a different person.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. I told myself I wasn't going to laugh when I read this first statement here. And I don't know if I'm going to make it through that, but it's a quote. Like, I have AI kind of help with the research and stuff.
Yeah.
And I believe you said this, but who knows when it's pulling transcripts from everywhere. He spent a decade earning a PhD in strength culture history just to have a smart sounding prefix to use while explaining why he ruined his kidneys for a plastic trophy.
That's pretty accurate. I mean, hey, I got some money out of it too. So, but yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Well, that kind of like is a real, when I read it, it's like, this is a real good summary of all this stuff that kind of played out over the years. What I want to do for context and for the audience too, because you haven't been around a whole lot in the last few years and you're on a very, very short list of real all-time world record holders. Got to put that caveat out there. That has also been an IFBB pro. There's not much, right? So it's Stan Efferding.
Yep.
That's kind of where I start to fall apart, because there's a lot of big power lifters that made it, but not when you're talking all-time world record holders. And then on the female side, Danny.
Yep.
Right? El Martinez, and she actually won a pro show. So I think when you go to winning a pro show,
yeah, that's next level, right?
I think it's just her. Did
Hunter
Brittany?
Anderson?
Did Hunter win?
Hunter, I believe, yes, Hunter did win a show. And I don't know if Brianni's won a show, but she's finished definitely first call out. She's pretty close.
What about men?
I don't know. I don't think anyone.
Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to do a brief origin story.
Okay.
Just to kind of catch people up, because you haven't been around. A lot of people listening probably don't even know who you are, which we're going to change that real quick. So I know you started competing in powerlifting when you were 25. What I don't know is what you were doing. Actually, it was a little bit before that. What were you doing before?
Before I was competing in powerlifting?
Yes.
Okay.
So say high school. When did you first start training?
So that's a funny story. My very first day in the gym, and it was at home, was September 11th, 2001. And I was a freshman in high school, and I lived in the DC area, and I had finally convinced my dad to, show me how to lift weights. My dad was just like a casual exerciser, right? So we had that little, those little red benches, with the like crappy plastic covering, and like some dumbbells. And he showed me how to do like tricep kickbacks or something. And so I go to school, and I have gym class first period, and we're running the mile, and I forget my gym clothes. So I'm running the mile in jeans, right? And then at the end of class, we see these, big smoke clouds, and we don't know what's going on. We think there's a fire or something. We go inside back into the school, and it's just very hectic. And I'm 13, 14, freshman in high school. I have no idea what's going on, but it's clearly a big deal.
So you're seeing the smoke from the Pentagon?
Yes. Yeah. And because that was in Alexandria, is where I went to school. And so I was like, I have no idea what's going on, but apparently I'm going to remember the first day that I started lifting weights. So I pretty much sucked at it all the way through high school.
Any sports in high school?
I wrestled and I ran cross country, but my school was like a nerdy school. It was like a magnet school for science and technology. And the joke, like, they actually sold bumper stickers, the school did, that said, "We came for the sports," like, ironically. So I was 103 my freshman year, like body weight, and we had no one in 103, 112, or whatever the weight class above that was. So I was wrestling varsity from day one. I had no technical skill whatsoever. I would just get pinned immediately, but you had to have somebody in the roster spot. So
was it strength?
Dude, I was super unathletic. I was super weak. The only thing I could do was deadlift. And our coach at the time, he was a pretty tough coach, but like, you didn't really train with weights then. And so there was one day we were doing deadlifts, and I could pull 225, like, for reps. And he gets these big eyes, because here's this skinny, nerdy kid who hasn't done anything all season. And all of a sudden he's pulling 225 like it's nothing. He looks at me, he's like, you keep that up, you'll be pretty good. It's like, okay, well, I can deadlift. And I never got any better at wrestling, but I got better at deadlifting.
So where did the early development of the mental fortitude start?
So I read I can't remember who the very first author was, but I got sucked into that kind of high intensity training mindset. So there was Stuart McRobert and Bob Whelan and Ken Leisner.
So this wasn't in grade school or
High
high
school.
school.
It was high
high
school.
school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I want to say it was Bob Whelan. I can't swear to that, but there was this protocol where you were going to put a weight on the bar that you could do for 20, and you were going to do it for 50. And you could take as much time as you wanted, but you got to, no, you had 20-minute time limit. You had to do it for 50 reps. So it was a trap bar deadlift. I can't remember how much weight I had on the bar. Like I was a tiny kid. It couldn't have been that much, but I would do 50 reps of it like week in and week out. And I had those old, I don't know if you remember Iron Mind, but they had these old blue straps that I don't know what they were made of, man, but they would tear.
The original. Yeah.
They would tear into your skin. And so every day through high school, I'd have all these torn calluses. Like my hands would be just bloody rags. My wrists would be messed up from the straps. And every time I went to the bathroom, and I was drinking like a gallon of water a day, so I had to piss all the time. Every time I went to the bathroom, it would just burn. And I was like, okay, well that sucks, but whatever. I'm just going to ignore it. And they would heal up by the time it was time for the next week's session. And I just kept doing that over and over and over again. And I don't think it made me stronger at all. I don't think it added any muscle, but it definitely gave me that mindset where it's like, okay, like this is just the sport. You're going to push through. That's cool.
Do you think the mindset was always there? I mean, because you're a science nerd, right?
Yeah.
So math science nerd, you went on to college for finance, I believe, right?
Yes.
So you're coming from this nerd type of background, but your ability to suffer, as we're going to find as we go through, is kind of unparalleled.
Fucked up. Yeah.
No, it's good and bad as
Yep.
we will discover as we go through this, but it's necessary. Yes, it's necessary. I mean, we may disagree as we move forward, but I think it's necessary for certain times. But it goes back to that. Is this developed or is it always there?
In hindsight, my best guess is that was the only, I had absolutely no emotional intelligence. I had no idea how to identify emotion, how to deal with emotion, none of it. And so, all of that just kind of gets stuck inside. And the only way I could get it out was like pushing that hard. Because like my family, very, very conflict avoidant, never had any sort of, like there was never any yelling. There was barely even any arguments. And that's not life. And so
how were you getting it out before you started the training though? Studying harder?
I can't remember, to be honest with you. I mean, 13, 14, I don't remember when I was like 8 or 9 you're talking.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I mean, I did Taekwondo and I enjoyed it, but it was just like a fun after school activity. I played video games, just like, it didn't really show up until I started lifting.
So the studying took you on, where'd you go to your undergrad?
Undergrad was UVA, Virginia. Yeah.
All right. And when you went there, what was the focus as you were going in?
So as I was going in, I was like, it was my first time leaving home, right? So I was pretty nervous, and UVA, they had, I don't know if it's still the case, they had a policy where, to help freshmen get acclimated, you have to stay on campus in a dorm where you're going to be with the same, I think it was like 12 people for the entire year. Which was a great thing, especially because one of the guys in my dorm was a competitive powerlifter. And you guys actually gave us some equipment. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a comp bench and a squat bar or something that we had in the old gym there. So he was like, he had some junior record, and I want to say it was the APF, like equipped and everything. I wish I could remember his name. His first name was Bill. I can't remember his last name. But we had a little bit of a crew, and that was kind of where I spent all of my time and energy. I remember sometimes you guys would have those clearance sales, and I would buy like hundreds of dollars of t-shirts. Just these giant boxes would be delivered. Like I was just all about it. And school was never really that hard. Like there was one year, or I think it was my third year in finance, that was kind of challenging, but for the most part, it was just
it's interesting.
Eat, sleep, and
Do
train.
you think that you still would have found that path had you not been with those 12 people?
That's a really good question. That's a really great question. And I have no idea because I wasn't competitive. I did not want to compete at the time. I just wanted to be strong and just wanted to look good. I didn't really have any desire to, because, Bill was an equipped lifter, right? And I didn't have any, I saw him putting on the suit and the shirt and how much time it took and how much help he needed. I was like, that looks like a lot. I don't know that I want to do all that. So I was happy just, kind of lifting raw and getting strong. And I was watching Croc and Justin Harris and all these guys who were like strong and jacked at the time. And I was like, yeah, that's better. That's all I need. I don't need to win these plastic trophies or anything like that. And it actually wasn't until I graduated, and, didn't have that crew, didn't have that gym. I was like, I got to find something. And so I went to, it was CrossFit Reston.
Where did you work after you graduated? Was it at Google yet?
Freddie
Freddie
Mac. Yeah.
And where was that?
Freddie Mac is in Tyson's Corner in Virginia near McLean.
But you're still
in the DC area. Yeah. And my boss lifted. He wasn't, kind of super serious about it, but like he could talk the talk, and he was super supportive. And so, he'd let me come in at 10 instead of 9 so that I could train in the morning and, stay a little bit later, make up work. So that was cool. But it wasn't really like enough for me. So I drive. It was a good, probably an hour drive on the weekends to this CrossFit gym that had just like strongman stuff in the back. And I was originally actually looking for CrossFit. I was like, maybe I could get into this. And I go in on a weekday and they've got it was like Powerman 5000 or something like that, just blasting. And these guys are lifting, they're doing stones or tires or something. I was like, this is sick. This is what I want to do. So that was The Edge, was the name of the gym. Barry Perkins ran it. And they had an unsanctioned meet a few months after I joined, and I did pretty terrible. But there was one event. It was a car deadlift. It was a Mini Cooper. It was Barry's Mini Cooper, and it was for reps. And everybody used the same Mini Cooper. Well, my deadlift leverages are like pretty nuts, especially at the time. Remember, because this would have been like 2009. Like raw lifting was not big there. So I did something like 25 reps, right? I won the event easily, and people are like screaming at me, and I'm like conscious in the middle of the set. I can't do that anymore, but like I'm very aware of what's going on. And it was the biggest adrenaline rush like I've ever had. Like I still remember that moment, and that was I can't do that math, but it was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So after that, I was just hooked. I was just all in.
I did not know that strongman came before the powerlifting.
Well, so first sanctioned comp, it was at Brute Strength in Virginia Beach, which is where I'm living now. Tore my bicep. And after that, I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Powerlifting's kind of boring. And that's the same time I was, kind of.
Was it a surgical tear?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it was a tough experience because when I did it, it was extraordinarily painful. I know sometimes they're not painful. It was extraordinarily painful. Had no idea what was going on. And one of the guys there, he was like, look, man, the doctors aren't going to want to give you an MRI for this. You got to get an MRI. And so I'm like, okay, like I believe you. And the doctors did not want to give me an MRI. I had to go to 3 doctors. And the last one, he was like, look, I will write you a prescription for an MRI. Wait 6 weeks. Don't get it filled yet. So I go get it filled the next day, right? He won't read it. So I take it to a 4th doctor to get him to read the MRI. Doctor doesn't even look at the MRI. The nurse, the tech, whatever, she looks at it. She's like, oh yeah, you need surgery right away. I was like, thanks for,
couldn't they just tell?
It didn't bruise. It didn't roll up. It was weird. But it was
really?
Completely detached. Yeah. So
I get the not bruising because if it's but I don't get the not rolling up.
You could see, but you had to be really had to look at it. And I remember because I told you my boss at the time he lifted, and I would show him. I was like, look, this right arm looks a little different to me. Can you see that? And he looks at it and he spends a couple of seconds. He's like, yeah, it's a little different, I think. But I can't tell for sure. It was kind of like
so the MRI really was kind of necessary.
Absolutely, yeah. And so then when the surgeon finally repaired it afterwards, he's like, man, that tendon had really retracted. I had to pull it down, quite a ways. I'm kind of worried that you're gonna have some nerve damage from it. So they sent me for these nerve tests afterwards, which like all it told you was like, okay, yeah. Afterwards, he was like, yep, your right side is weaker than your left. I was like, no shit, buddy. I just tore it. Like I haven't been training for 6 weeks because I was still training the left side. So I just ignored that. I was like, these guys have no idea what they're talking about. They wouldn't give me the MRI in the first place. Like I'm not going to pay attention to any of this. And I think that, over time, that's why I accumulated so many injuries is because I never really dealt with that. So I finish, I don't finish. I'm getting bored with Freddie Mac. I don't want to do strongman.
Well, I was going to ask, was the work what you thought it was going to be?
So not exactly. So I was at Freddie Mac in 2008, 2009, right? So I'm in mortgage credit risk management at the height of the subprime crisis. And so coming out of school for finance, you're like, I'm in the thick of it. Like this is awesome. Like I'm on the front lines. It's so fucking boring, man. It's all database work. And like, I don't really know any like programming languages or anything like that, but like I'm a hobbyist and they let me do some of that to, at least have some stuff that's fun to work on. But oh man, I don't know if everybody out here is going to have seen Office Space, but it really felt like Office Space, with the exception of the fact that my boss was really cool. And so actually my whole team was pretty cool. But I couldn't deal it. I couldn't do it. So I just like, I thought about what I wanted to do. I was like, again, I was a science and tech nerd. I was like, I want to work at Google. So I just applied to a position through like monster.com or something through Google. And I get an interview. They fly me out there. They're like, yep, you can come work here and everything. And I told my dad, and my dad straight up goes, he's like, yeah, I don't know if you can handle moving across the country. And I'm like, well, I'm doing it then. Like that answered that question. I'm absolutely doing that. So I move on out to California, and Google's awesome. Google is like all the stories that people tell and everything about all the perks and how much crazy stuff that they have that nobody knows about. That's all true. 100% true. But I was still doing the same stuff. And they cared even less at Google because it was still fraud analysis. But for Google, the only purpose of that was for, they had to report to the government. That was, they had to check this box. For them, all the fraud, it was a rounding error compared to the profits they were making. So they didn't care. Like we report, hey, look, you're losing X $100 million a month on these. So they're like, okay, whatever, don't worry about it. And so it's like, what am I doing here? What is the point of this? So that's when I decided I'm going to kind of go to grad school. And I'm not like training seriously at the time. I'm training at Wild Iron, which was an equipped gym in Santa Clara. And Marcus Wild owned the gym. That was the name of it. And there were some hardcore guys there. But it was multiply, and I still didn't want to do that. So, I would lift with them, but I was still doing my own thing, and it wasn't really
So where are we at now? We at like 2012?
2012. Yeah.
So Rawls just now started.
Yes. And that's important.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, and I decided I want to go to business school, but I don't want to just go to like business school because I know that'll just put me higher up in the finance thing, right? Like,
well, that's interesting though, because isn't like, people might get pissed at this, but isn't finance like the pinnacle of the business school?
So
or marketing's kind of like the lower.
That's a funny story about that. The day I made up my mind, Google really encouraged like cross-pollination. So if you wanted to go to like a talk or a presentation in another area of the company that you might be interested in, you could do that. No questions asked, take your time off, go do it. So I went to a marketing presentation with a guy who was pretty high up because I was like, look, maybe finance isn't right for me. Maybe I want to do marketing. So the guy in marketing, he's given this talk and he starts off by saying the reason he got into it is his dream was always to own a restaurant. And he knew that if he was going to own a restaurant, he was going to have to get the word out. And so he went into marketing to be able to do that. And he went into marketing and, one thing led to another. And he ended up taking a job at Google and having a wife and kids instead of, ever opening the restaurant, and things went well for him. And he talked about his career trajectory. And at the end of the talk, I asked him, I was like, hey man, so whatever happened to the restaurant dream? He's like, well, I realized sometimes you just got to grow up and let your dreams die. And I was like, I'm 23. I was like, I'm not doing that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back to school, but I'm going to do something I enjoy. And so I decided I want to go into sports management, which is like the lowest tier of business school, right? But that's what I want to do. So I'm looking at programs, and Texas has one of the top sport management programs in their business school. And I'm looking around the website and I find Jan Todd's resume on the business school website somehow. I forget how. And so if a lot of people here aren't going to know Jan, but she runs the Arnold Strongman Classic every year. She was a very, very influential powerlifter in like the early days, in like the 60s and the 70s.
Terry was still alive.
When Terry was still alive and competing. Yep. So I call Jan and I say, hey, look, I'm really thinking about applying to McCombs. I'm really into lifting. I'm not super competitive about it, but I would love to, collaborate on a project with you while I'm there if that's, something on the table. And Jan's like, Ben, I don't think you want to go to business school. I think you actually just want to work for me. And I'm like, no, Jan, I want to go to business school. And Jan is a very smart person. And she goes, okay, well, listen, Bill Kazmaier's on the other line. I got to go talk to him. Why don't you think about it and let me know? I'm like, wait, the Bill Kazmaier? And she's like, yeah, we're friends. I'm like, okay. And she sends me an email a little while later and she's like, what if you just take the entrance exam? You don't have to, there's no obligation here. Just give us your scores in case you decide down the road that you do want to do this. I was like, whatever, I'm going to have to take entrance exams for business school anyway. I might as well do two. So I do that and I send my scores in, and then Jan's like, hey, you did pretty good on your scores. Why don't you just apply? The application's like 2 pages. You get in, there's no obligation. I was like, fine, sure, it's paperwork, whatever. So I put in the application. She's like, Ben, why don't you let me apply for a scholarship for you? Again, there's no obligation. You can see, this way you'll be able to compare the financial costs, et cetera, et cetera. So they end up offering me like a full ride plus a salary just to go to school for the
Mm-hmm.
duration. So I'm like, okay, all right, like I'll do that. I'm going to be making money instead of spending however many $100,000 on business school. So I end up there.
So what was the exact program?
The exact name of the program when I started was Interdisciplinary Studies in Physical Culture and Sport, which is essentially the history of exercise.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I graduated, it was called something different, but I think that's still what's on my diploma. I should know. My diploma's on my wall, but I never look at it because I haven't used that at all, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
whatever the intro line was, that was pretty much true. But when I was in Texas, I was told by one of my CrossFit friends that I had to go to Hyde Park Gym, real old school gym, been around forever, right near campus, really cool place. So I go to Hyde Park Gym, and the very first day I meet this guy. His name's Jacob Cloud, and he's a cool guy, very social, and he's like an old school lifter himself. He hadn't been lifting super long, but he really loved the old school stuff. So we have that in common. And I'm telling him I really want to do strongman, and he looks at me and he's like, "Bro, you're not built for strongman, but you could be a really good power lifter." I'm like, "Well, I kind of want to do strongman." He's like, "Okay, well, just think about it." So I do a strongman show. It was, I think it was Joe Mills' show actually, and I don't have much fun. I'm too worried about hurting myself again. I don't love it. So I go to Jacob and I'm like, "Listen, maybe you're right. Let me try powerlifting out. It seems more boring, but I'll give it a shot."
The other day I went to McDonald's, and after I paid, I had sticker shock. And then I kind of realized that meal prep services are actually more affordable than getting fast food, and it's way better for you. Today I'd like to speak to you about Visionary Meals. Visionary Meals is a Central Ohio meal prep company that sources their ingredients through local farmers. 90% of the ingredients are all locally sourced, 100% gluten-free, with a customized meal selection that is beyond anything I've ever seen before. And I've used a lot of meal prep companies in the past. I'm sure you have as well. They have a completely customized section where you can build your own meals. You can scale up the protein with each meals. They rotate the meals every single week. And they have an RD on staff that helps with the receipts and does one-to-one nutritional counseling. One of my favorites through them is the barbecue beef bowl, which is just amazing. They have tons of locations throughout the region, or they'll bring the food to you. Go to visionarymeals.com and check out the variety of the food they have there. Hopefully before the end of the year, they're going to be able to ship nationwide. Use the code TABLETALK10 for 10% off your first order.
And when you're watching, powerlifting is pretty boring.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing it, I told you before we started,
Mm-hmm.
like I have never in my life found a bigger adrenaline rush. So I was just hooked. And Jacob was right. I was a pretty good lifter. So that was a just very fortunate series of events that led me to kind of getting into it at exactly the right time, right? Because that was 2013.
Mm-hmm.
That was when Raw started to take off. So right place, right time, a lot of luck.
So where from a priority mindset standpoint did the training start to become more important
It was still
than everything else?
it like this sounds really arrogant. I don't mean it that way. I never had trouble in school. I never had trouble. I didn't have to try that hard, right? Like if I wasn't training at Freddie Mac most of the time, I was on YouTube or managing my fantasy football team. In school, like I would be doing classwork, and I'd ask my best friend. I was like, "This is really easy. Like, what am I supposed to do with my time?" Because I didn't have to work. Most people had to work to put themselves through
Mm-hmm.
school, and I had that scholarship. He's like, "Look, dude, it is going to get harder. Just enjoy it right now." So that's what I did. Like, and I was 23, like, or 24 at the time. And like, so I could go out on weekends, right, and drink and then be in the gym the next day at 8 a.m. and still be productive.
So was it the first thing that you felt like you can go all in on this?
The first thing that both I enjoyed enough to go all in at and was challenging enough that I had to push myself. Because I'm sure I could have pushed myself intellectually, but I wasn't that interested in it. Like I said, nobody cared what I was doing at Freddie Mac. Nobody cared what I was doing at Google. I tried before I went to college. I did an internship at Georgetown Medical Center to see if I wanted to go into chemistry, and I was working on a research project that involved the effects of catecholamines on neonatal heart development in embryonic mice. And so we do this like really ornate experiment. That was, all the things that you read about in your high school science classes. Like we're actually doing it. And so we run the gel electrophoresis. I don't know how I remember these words. And we get the results, and I'm looking at the results, and these are gibberish. I swear to you, these are gibberish. And the professor that I'm working for, he looks at it, he's like, no, this says this, and this, and then he draws like a line across it. It's bullshit. He wanted to get that paper published. I am 100% sure of that, and I knew it at the time. And I was like, well, I'm not doing this. This is a game too. So let me just go on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And the first thing that really felt real to me was lifting.
So with that in mind, was there a point to where the other stuff became even less important?
Even less important in terms of like work?
Of work and school and that kind of.
So there was one point at the very end, and so this is a funny story. Okay, so I'm done with coursework for school. I'm done. I'm writing my dissertation. It's like a 500-page biography of Jack LaLanne. And Jan is very happy with it. And she tells me that. She's like, look, typically these dissertation defenses are really tough. We're going to pass you. Like, you're going to be fine. And so my panel included a guy whose name was John Hoberman, very, very well-respected anti-doping guy. And I was competing, like, this was after the US Open. Like, I was very obviously running stuff. And he took an issue with that, in particular because one of his good friends had died recently. And I think he was, kind of feeling his own mortality a little bit more. Very human, very understandable. And because, dude, he nitpicked this dissertation to the level of like grammatical errors in my footnotes and just like totally unnecessary things, and wanted a full rewrite for essentially grammatical errors and, little citation fixes. So I had to take another semester, which I wasn't paying for. The school was paying for it. So I have to do this busy work. John has to reread the whole dissertation, and the school has to pay for it. It helped no one. And at that point, again, because I did want to teach up until then, and I was like, okay, this is just another joke that people are, going through the motions for. I don't want to do this.
So when you're defending that, because a big part of the PhD is you have to defend it, right?
Yep.
How are they coming at you if they don't have any experience in the history of the... You get what I'm saying?
Yes. So
I get it if it's like a programming thing, they can kind of come at these different angles, but I also understand that they're coming from different colleges because they're testing you to see if you can teach.
So in history, a big part of your defense is actually just telling the story, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that was me presenting, right? And then they ask, kind of the easy questions and everything. So by the time John starts talking, we're already like 3 hours in, and I'm hungry and I'm tired. And he goes on a rant for like an hour. So it's 4 hours in. I walk out of the defense. Like, I just walk out. I tell them, look, I'm done. And they still let me graduate. So that was pretty cool. But there wasn't really a whole lot of substance to it. And I don't mean that as a knock to the program. I think that was my own fault, right? It's pretty fucking dumb to be running a bunch of gear and then have the world's most renowned anti-doping expert on your panel. Like, I should have seen that one coming. But it was a very bad experience. And I remember Stacy, my fiance at the time, she was waiting for me, waiting for the defense. We drive home in absolute silence. I am furious. And I remember I immediately went to bed. It was like 7:00 at night. I immediately go to bed. I wake up in the morning, I go into the gym, and I tell Jacob, I need to squat heavy today. Like, I don't say anything else. And I put something like 700 pounds on the bar, and it's just like an abomination of a rep. But I was like, I really needed that because I hadn't learned how to deal with any emotion whatsoever.
So at that time, when you're graduating, defending your dissertation, where are you at as far as the powerlifting?
I don't remember if I'd already set a world record, but I had won the US Open. The one with, it was 40 grand in prize money. I had won that. I don't think, I would have to get the exact dates for you.
But you're there, right?
Yes,
you're there. You're at the top, right? So it's, because I don't know how they can accuse you of that unless they know, what I'm saying? It takes balls to do that, especially as a professor, because you're not like, hey.
They didn't explicitly say that, but it was also pretty obvious. I mean, back in 2015, when I was in the USAPL, I pulled 700 at 181. And at the time that was a US record or something like that. And then John Hack comes on like 10 minutes later and just eviscerates 705. Like, it's nothing, like it's an empty bar. And then they give me the WADA drug test and they don't test him at all. And I'm like, look, I know what I look like, but at the same time, like, that's not fair. And that's when I decided and I don't think John was running anything. You can look at his numbers now. He wasn't running anything, but like, I was still pissed off about it. And that's when I got on.
Yeah. So you weren't either, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
so
exactly.
So interesting, right? Because had that been the same time that you were defending this, you're still going to be accused of something that you're actually not doing.
Exactly.
which is kind of screwed up.
Well, it's also Jan had my back because Jan had written a lot about that exact situation, and I think Jan was also pretty sympathetic because she knew, how important the lifting was to me. And Terry pulls me in. Jan pulls me into a conference one time with Terry, and she's explaining, she's like, listen, Ben, you are doing great at lifting right now. I know that you're probably making more money coaching and competing than you would as a professor, which was true. But, there's going to come a time in your life when, you're going to want to shift your focus. And, there's a lot more prestige and a lot more fulfillment in being a professor, which is fair for her to say because she had done both. And she's like, isn't that right, Terry? And Terry goes, Ben, you can only be strong for so long, but you can look good for a really long time. And I was like, okay, well, I got to make a decision here, and I'm going to keep lifting. I'm going to keep going.
Interesting, right? Because you're kind of in that phase now to where you can understand where she was really coming from.
I can understand where both of them were coming from.
Yes.
Yeah, but it took another 10 years before I got there.
No, but he seemed to have the more realistic view. Like he understood where you were at that time.
Yes.
Which is interesting. Now, when you were studying the history of strength culture and all these other things, was any of the things that you were finding playing into how you were programming for yourself?
No, and I really wish it had, but I went through every PLUSA magazine in existence, literally. And like the programming was not that good. It wasn't as good as the stuff that you were putting out and a bunch of other people were putting out at the time. And I went through because that's what I wanted, right? That's what I really wanted was to see, like, are there secrets in here? What I did find was, and I actually wrote my comprehensive exams about this, the idea of writing programs that you're going to market as, kind of individualized programs. And in reality, you're giving the same thing to every single person that comes to you. And so that started in you can make the argument that started before 1900, but really 1909. That was the first time. So it's still going on today, right?
Wow.
And, yeah.
So who was the originator?
The very first one, boy, Titus. I can't remember his first name. Professor Titus. I'd have to look up his first name for you. They all went by professor, even though they had no actual degree or anything. But the first name most people would recognize, Charles Atlas. Before Charles Atlas was actually a guy named Earl Lederman, and that's who I wrote my comprehensive exams about. And I think this is a published article if anybody wants to look it up. But anyway, Lederman did the exact same thing. He would write these programs. He would tell everybody, hey, these are individualized for you. He'd send them out by mail. He'd handwrite in the names. Everything else was just it wasn't photocopied. I think it was mimeographed back in that time. This guy was making millions of dollars in the early 1900s. He was living large, like big time, and his downfall came during the Depression. His wife left him and took all of his assets. And I don't know the details about how she got them, but she just middle of the night picked up, took everything, and he didn't have enough to continue to market because it was the middle of the Depression. But Atlas found some backers to, kind of front his marketing. And so he's the one who was able to survive the Depression. That's why everybody knows about Atlas and nobody knows about any of the other guys.
Interesting. Because fast forwarding to just the PLUSA, like you could go on there and find Pacificos. There were a handful of people but I don't know if they were marketing it as individual. It was just,
I don't think that they were. I don't think that they were. At that point, things had gotten a little bit more community oriented, I think. And so they were very much saying, hey, look, no, we're not going to write individual programs. This is how everybody should train, right? And there was a time where that was, the thing. Everybody trained the same way. And that sounds like not so great. But in reality, if you think about how the sport is just coming up and if actually you zoom out and you look at other fields, that's a very productive way to learn. If you have everybody doing the same thing, that's essentially a giant scientific experiment. Not the most controlled one, but hey, you're going to have some outliers and then you're going to have some, you're going to have outliers on either end. And those are going to tell you a lot more than if you had everybody doing something different.
That's interesting because I remember in Powerlifting USA, the workout of the month or whatever it was. And it was always some linear based periodization type of thing. And the only thing that really changed, maybe the percentages by like 5 or whatever, was frequency. Like some of the guys were twice a week. Most of them were always once a week. And it was, man, after like the first year, it's like, okay, this is just, I guess I'm just going to select based upon the accessory movement.
And maybe sometimes you would have a little bit of a wave progression or, these little tiny nuances, but there were no new ideas at all.
Yeah. That's interesting though, when as you just noted, when you step out and look at it, if everybody's kind of doing that, then you you kind of figure out what's the base. And then what typically was not in those things were the accessories. It's like, here's the squat
Mhm.
waves. Here's the, every now and again there would be, but not very
Very
often.
generic stuff too.
Yeah. Like do this and then 3 sets of 10 on the incline and
Yep, yep,
3 sets of 10
exactly.
on lat pull downs or whatever it's going to be. And, but if everybody's kind of following that, and it was, I think Ken Leisner popped up with a HIIT training type of approach, and then Louis eventually with more of a conjugate approach, but that was really it, and it was still the predominantly all linear based, which is kind of what everything is,
Yep, yep.
once you get through all that. Um, Interesting. So with your own programming, you're, because at a certain point, and we're not there yet, you start to migrate in the hypertrophy with the strength and cycling more of the volume than the intensity. From that, was it all blocked out? I mean, when you were programming, were you like, here's this meat and I'm just going to back program from that
At
meat, or
first,
were you looking at longer?
no, at first that was all I would do. I'd pick a meat, I'd program backwards, and then I'd use drugs to make up the gap.
Yeah, yeah, that works really well.
It
For
works
a
really well
short
for a
time.
short time. Yep, that's
Yes.
exactly right.
Okay. So with that, were you starting at eights, or were you, because when you came in that
Oh, I
at
think I
some
was
point
starting
that,
15s.
oh really, so
Yeah.
you were really old school,
Yeah.
because at some point people start kicking out the eights and the 15s, and
Yeah.
kind of like starting with five. So you were
Mhm.
starting like 2 sets of 15, then down to 10s, then
Mhm.
eights.
Mhm.
Interesting, right? Because there's a lot of hypertrophy based in that, because you'll have 2, 4, 6, like 6, maybe even 8 weeks sometimes
Yep.
of reps over 6, and then 4 weeks, 5 threes and ones.
It's funny
Kind of sucks for
because
strength.
for a guy whose background is like that really high intensity stuff, like that's how I guess I do really well with volume. I mean, I think we had a discussion, you and I had a discussion once, and I was having trouble with my accessory work, and you're like, well, historically, what have you found? I was like, sets of 100 seems to work really well. You're like, do that, and they
Mm-hmm.
still work really well for me, and I'll program that for some of my guys. I'll be like, look, you're gonna do 200 reps of push downs, and they do them, and it seems to work.
So with the PEDs, with that, was it when you're going through those cycles, the progress from the 15s, the 10s, and the 8s are probably going to be easy for you, right? Was it when it started to drop down to the 5s to where,
So the thing you got to keep in mind is that I was trying to stay either 181 or 198 because
yeah,
at the time, the best guy in the world was Yuri Belkin, and I was like, I'm not going to beat Yuri. I don't want to be in that weight class, even though that would be more comfortable. I'd be able to eat normally, right? Like I was trying to stay light, and so I could not take that much gear. Like right now, I can walk around easily at 240 with shredded glutes on 300, 400 mixed total. So trying to run, a gram and stay 181, I was eating 1,800 calories a day. Like I was done.
how fast did you start to have problems with that? Because you were competing at 181 for a while.
Define problems.
Well, if you when you first start competing at 181, you probably weighed like 190,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
like easily within striking range.
mm-hmm.
Well, the problem happens when you put on more lean tissue, and then cutting that weight becomes harder,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Because now you're not 190, you're
Right,
215,
right.
right? And you're lean, right? So now it's not just skipping
Gotcha.
a meal and the
Yes,
water.
yes, yes.
And at a certain point, this becomes a big issue because you're leaner, you have more muscle.
Yes. So my third meet.
Third,
Third,
wow,
third hit.
your third, like for real, like your third meet.
Not third total, third on gear. Yeah.
Okay, third on gear. So how we 6, 7 meets in 4 years?
Total. Oh boy.
Because that's a big constraint for somebody that's relatively new to the sport.
I've never taken the time to think about it. It's a great question. So my first meet was 181, and I think I was actually underweight. My second meet was nationals, USAPL World Nationals 2013. I remember I didn't have trouble making weight. Well, I didn't have trouble making weight for that meet. My third meet was the Arnold in 2014. That went really poorly, but I still don't think I had trouble making weight. So it would have been 2015, my fourth meet.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, so total 7 meets in.
Wow, right? Because it's the one thing that we'll tell anybody getting into the sport is, don't cut weight, right? And so now you're faced with this big constraint early on. So it's kind of like your normal.
Yep. It is my normal. It is my normal, to the point where I tried doing a meet without a cut, and I was like, I was so flat, like mentally flat. I was like, what am I doing here? Like, this is just a training day. I don't like this.
So
It was
when
weird.
did you know that it was time? Because when we were sponsoring all the lifters, you were one of them back in the time. Like I remember Brian Schwab. I remember all these people. It's like, dude, just go up already. You're going to kill
You
yourself.
told me that several times, and I just ignored you.
I know, but it's like, man, this, because every year, even if you just put on 3 pounds of lean body mass, it's in over 3 years now. That's 10 more pounds of lean body mass, which might be
Yep.
22 pounds
Yep. Yep.
of weight.
So here's what happened. I think I have a good excuse here. Okay. So my very first meet on gear is a local meet in Texas, and I'm 198, which I'd never been before. And I actually did have to cut a couple of pounds to get there. And I had a blast. I had a fantastic meet, one of the best meets I've ever had. The second meet at 198 was Boss of Bosses. And that was my first big meet with all these guys that I had looked up to my whole career. Like, it was Dan Green's meet.
Mm-hmm.
I had always wanted to be just like Dan Green. I was still 198. The cut was still easy. It was awesome. After Boss of Bosses, Gracie V, I'm sorry, Grace, I can't pronounce her last name. Anyway, she announces the U.S. Open with the
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 150 grand total prize money, and she announces that prize money is going to be lightweight men, heavyweight men, women, and Yuri's doing the heavyweight men, and I was like, I can't beat Yuri. I'm going to go lightweight. The lightweight cutoff's 181. So I'm sitting here at 210, 215. I was like, I got to be 181. Like, I'm going to do this. So I do a local meet. We talked, off camera about that cut, and it was a brutal cut, but I made it. I had a good meet, and I qualified. And I was like, okay, well, we can do this again. Like, it was over 40 grand, right? I was like, let's do it. And so I do that cut, and that cut's harder, but like I make it, and I win the meet, and I'm like, okay, this is what I do. I'm just a guy who cuts weight. Like, let's do it. So I tried to do a third one, and the third one, like, it's bad. It's bad. Like, I could do the first two, and it catches up with you. And I mean, the intro thing talked about the kidneys. It was never the gear that hurt my kidneys, and my kidneys are fine now, by the way. It was more the brain that suffered. But the weight cuts were scary. Like, those were dangerous. Those were absolutely dangerous. So the third one was absolutely brutal. And after that, I was stuck in this place where I was like, look, I had already decided I'm the guy who cuts weight and I win by cutting weight. And now you're telling me I can't necessarily count on that. I don't know what to do. And so I spend the next like kind of year in limbo. And eventually I'm like, fine, I'll go 198. And when I do it, like I break the world record of that meet. So it's like, there's all these signals, right? You should be heavier. And I just keep fighting it because I'd already decided like that was my identity in the sport, was the guy who did the big weight cuts. And I did, for the record, I did enjoy them, like as fucked up as it is. Like, I literally enjoyed the process of that suffering.
Well, you're being rewarded too, because it
Exactly,
is world records that you're breaking, and
Yeah.
whatever the prize money is, it's great. But
We-
the world record kind of means
We
weight.
talk about like easy dopamine, like doom scrolling and stuff. And that's true, but like the reward from dopamine that you work for, it's a lot higher. So
Mhm.
you get addicted pretty quickly. Yeah, after that, I don't really know what to do. Because I when I started out, my goal was to deadlift 600 pounds. I was like, if I deadlift 600 pounds, I'm gonna be done. I'm gonna be so happy. It's gonna be amazing. And I can still remember deadlifting 600 pounds, and I put the weight down. I'm like, I'm still the same person. This sucks.
Mhm.
It was bad, right? And so you just keep chasing more weight and more weight, and it never does anything else for you. It never does anything else for you.
So up to this point, did you have any lifts competitively that took forever to finish? Right? Because I call these the ones that mess with your mind more than anything else. Like, the technique's good, everything's on point. It takes forever to finish, and then you get this reality, like, oh man, I got to actually get stronger.
Are you talking about a single individual lift that you have to
Yes.
grind through?
Yes.
I didn't.
So you never had that experience. It's because I'll never forget the first time I had, it was like an 870 squat or whatever it was. It took forever, right? And nothing broke technically. It was all good. And I remember driving back with Louie, and I don't know. I'm like, what are we going to do now? Like, if you smoke a weight, it's like, okay, I'm back and I'll just do that. Or if you miss it because you fell out of the groove or something like that, okay, I could fix that. But this is like, everything went right and it just took forever. And when you're already kind of at your upper limit and you get smacked with this reality, like, you got to physically get stronger.
So to get there, though, you have to have good technique in the first place.
Yeah.
And my strategy for lifting was always, okay, I'm going to brace as hard as I possibly can, get as much air as I possibly can, and try as hard as I possibly can. But technique never really entered the picture. Like there was some nuance to it, but like the idea of being able to differentiate, I'm dead serious when I say this. The idea of being able to differentiate mentally between knee flexion and hip flexion in the squat did not exist for me. It was you go down, you come up. That was it.
No, but you were, I mean, you figured out how to keep as stable and as braced as you possibly could, to the point that where you're gripping the bar when you squatted was stupid. But when I look at the technique, I'll look at the bar path.
Yep.
It was straight up, right? I don't care what somebody's doing. If it's going straight up, then what are you going to change?
Well, I had to contort my spine to get it to move like that. And eventually that catches up with
sure
it,
does.
Right? Yeah.
But at that time, you know what I'm saying? It's weird because people can tell you, look, you need to change this and this, but to do that, you're going to see this dip before there's a bump. And when you're competing and you're breaking world records and all this other stuff, are you willing to take that risk? Exactly. It's not a risk. It's going to happen.
Right.
You're going to drop down before it goes back up. Nobody's going to do, I don't care who it is. Nobody's going to do it. They're going to wait till they get hurt and they're going to do it.
100%.
Right.
And it's funny that you call it the squat grip, because I do think that was probably, if I had to choose one compensation that it was the worst, it was that squat grip.
Mm-hmm. So what brought you into the bodybuilding side? Was it injury?
Yeah. Of course. There was a brief stint where I was like, I've already set a world record. Let me try bodybuilding. And so I'm like, I can gain weight. So I bump up the gear, and instantly I'm like, I look like a bodybuilder. This is easy. I don't want to do this. Right? Because like easy stuff, it just doesn't interest me that much. Now, did I know anything about actual bodybuilding? No. Right? Like I was just a hobbyist. I was like, oh, big muscles are cool. I can get big muscles by running more gear. There's more to the sport than that. But that was my mindset at the time. So then I decided I want to go back to 181 for God knows why reason. And now at this point, I just can't handle it. I just can't handle it. And it feels like every single week is injury after injury after injury. And I'm like, okay, I got to take a break. I don't want to leave the gym. Let me try bodybuilding.
I've been training for over 4 decades now, and keeping track of all my training metrics has always been a big part of that. It wasn't until later on that I realized that keeping track of your internal metrics are just as important, if not more important, the longer you're in this game. Most primary care physicians, if you go in for any type of issue, they'll look for what's off, but they're not necessarily looking for how to optimize where your labs are for where you want to go. That's where Merrick Health comes in. Merrick Health does advanced blood work with medical providers around the world and a health coach who helps build a plan around your goals. I worked with Merrick to build a custom lab panel for this show. They have guided optimizations that can help you set you up with a health coach to be able to work through what your goals are, from the prescriptions to supplements, just the whole deal. Don't have to do that. You can just do the lab panels. They have options. You can find this at merrickhealth.com/table talk for 10% off your first order. One of the best decisions that I ever made was to partner with Merrick. So I highly suggest you head over to merrickhealth.com/table talk and get started today. So with that, was it Classic that you got your pro card?
And to be fair, I knew I did not fit Classic. I did not get my pro card in Classic. I did my first show at Classic. I knew I did not fit Classic. Everyone told me I didn't fit Classic, but I wanted to stay light. I wanted to leave that 181 on the table. And the cutoff for my weight class for Classic at the time was 184. So it was like, perfect, right? I'll do this show. Maybe I'll be good at it, maybe I won't, but either way I can come back to powerlifting and stay with it.
Were you doing that? Okay, you just answered the question. So you were doing that to be able to come back to powerlifting and not have to worry about it.
I remember I would be going through these sessions doing this bodybuilding work and hating it, and I'd be like, this is what it's going to take to beat John. John meaning John, right? Mm-hmm. That was my motivation to get through those bodybuilding workouts.
So what convinced you to then go the bodybuilding route instead of the Classic?
So I was working with John Meadows for that first show. And John's known for his conditioning, and like, I wanted to be that lean. Right. And I told him that up front. And so he pushed me, and I got that lean. Like I was crazy lean, and it was miserable, even for a guy who like is pretty naturally lean, doesn't have to diet all that hard. It was rough.
What about it was rough? Because you've always been lean.
Yeah. And it's not like I wasn't eating much. And John told me at the time, he was like, Ben, you're not starving. Like I'm feeding, I think it was like 3,000 calories a day. And I'm like, I realized that, John, everything hurts. I am tired all the time. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of how it is. And we talked again, I think it was off camera. It's like, maybe if I had won, maybe if I had done well, then it would have been a different story. But like, I was getting second at local shows, right? At Classic. It doesn't fit my body. And I'm also not a great poser, which is important for Classic. So I didn't enjoy the experience at all. And I get off stage for nationals. It was my second show. I did nationals, and I think I get like 10th or something like that. And I called John. I was like, "Listen, John, I really appreciate your help. I didn't have fun with this. I don't want to do it again." And he's like, "Okay, I get it." And Justin Harris at the time, he told me, he was like, "Look, like the same thing that Jacob Cladd told me for powerlifting." He was like, "Look, you don't have the build for Classic, but you could be a really good open bodybuilder." And I was like, well, how long would that take? And he's like, with you, man, I don't think it would take that long. So we go from 181 to 270 in that 1 year, right? And it's the pandemic year. So you're not allowed to post anything, right? Because you're supposed to pretend that the gyms are closed. And I'm not even going to say the gyms that I trained at, but I was able to train the whole time. And so when the quarantine's over and I can start posting it, everybody's looking at me like, what the fuck happened? Like, and so, and then we go back to
How much of that was new though? Because if you were making 50-pound cuts, right? So that would put you
the highest I had ever been before. And this was like, it would have been 2016. And then we're talking 2019. So 3 years ago, I was 227. That was the highest I got. And I got to 272.
Yeah. So it's
so at least, at least 45 pounds of new tissue.
So what was that like just walking around?
It was bad, man. It was really bad. So, and the drug doses were not insane, but the food was insane. And after John's diet, I could not stop eating. I have never been a big eater. Like that's the hardest challenge for me. I tell people all the time, if I didn't have to eat, I would be so happy. My life would be so much better. I couldn't stop. Even the day after the show, I am like, or excuse me, the night of the show, I can't stop eating. Like we have like a regular meal out that I could have after. I go home, I eat an entire box of oatmeal. I eat like a box of protein bar. I just keep eating and eating. I'm like, I physically can't stop. I've never experienced anything like that. It was miserable. And that feeling, like it gets a little bit, like over time, it goes down a little bit, but it's not like one day and it's gone. And so Justin has had me like lean into this. And so we're doing cheat meals every night where it's like, eat as much as you can, to the point where I'm waking up in the middle of the night, throwing up, eating more, and then going back to bed. And
how were you dealing with just the stomach pain?
So I had a client at the time. His wife was a sports psychologist, right? And he's like, look, man, this looks hard. Like maybe you should talk to her, see if she has some advice. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I talked to her and I'm telling her all this stuff, and she's giving me like, I think the good sports psychologists do give you practical solutions. So it's like, I can't tie my shoes. I'm too big to tie my shoes. Like I can't breathe when I'm doing it. She's like, well, get shoes you don't have to tie. Okay, that makes sense, right? And so like to this day, I don't wear shoes that you have to tie.
Yeah, but that doesn't help with like the heartbeat that's constantly in your stomach.
Just ignore it. And like my feet swelled 2 full shoe sizes. There was one point where Dante Trudell, who's like a real old time bodybuilder guy, he owns nutrition, a bunch of stuff. He messages me and he's like, cause I had a posing video where he could see my feet. He's like, Ben, that's not healthy. You got to do something about that. And I don't, I just want to keep going up and keep going up, keep going up.
I'm still kind of stuck in this because when you're eating like that, sleeping is an issue, man, because you lay on your back.
No, you don't lay on your back. You suffocate.
Your side.
So the way I would sleep on the floor. I'd turn to my side. I'd chew a piece of gum to keep the saliva going so my mouth would stay a little bit open. It'd take me probably an hour to fall asleep. I'd fall asleep. I'd stay, and I had to take, I can't remember if I was using like Benadryl or ibuprofen. I had to take something to sleep in addition to like weed or whatever.
Yeah.
Eventually you fall asleep.
So you knock yourself out.
Yep. You sleep for a couple hours, and then you'd have dreams of, it was either I was drowning, I was being smothered by a pillow, and you just wake up gasping. There was one point the sleep apnea was so bad, my neighbors were complaining about the vacuuming at 3 a.m. I was like, I'm not fucking vacuuming at 3 a.m. I'm not going to vacuum in the middle of the night. Like, what's going on? It was my snoring, right? Like, just ignore it. You just push through.
Now, were you doing cardio at the time?
I was doing, yes, but it was like the high intensity type cardio. So like 12 minutes total, which I do think is valuable. And then I was walking and stuff.
Did it help though? A little bit.
In terms of dealing with those symptoms?
Yes.
No, not really. I think it probably helped in terms of the damage that I was doing to my organs. It probably was preventative in some way, but no, it didn't really help with those. Honestly, I would dread it because I'd feel so out of breath. I'd feel like I was suffocating while I was doing that stuff.
that's well, I'm looking for that practical advice for those people that are trying to gain weight,
Oh,
right?
gotcha,
Because
gotcha,
the only
gotcha.
time you
No,
actually
totally.
feel good is when you train.
Yes,
So you feel good
yes.
for like 2.5 hours a day,
Yep,
and
yep.
then the whole rest of it, you feel like shit.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot that I would do different. But so if you were trying to gain weight really aggressively, Stan Efferding, his recommendation, do those 10-minute walks after meals. That will help significantly.
Hmm.
When you don't have that food volume sitting in your gut, it is going to help a lot. Like a lot of that out of breathness is that your gut is so full, there's no room for your diaphragm to actually expand all the way. So you have these short, shallow breaths. It's also going to lead to rib flare. People will talk about, GH gut being the reason that these guys are unable to control their waistline. A lot of times it's actually your ability to breathe correctly. And it is because you're walking around all day with a full stomach and you have to take these,
Hmm.
breaths up into your chest. You can't really control your diaphragm really well. I mean, I'm not saying that's all of it, but that's the majority of it. So that's one thing you should do. The other thing is like, because I was trying to do, like the traditional bodybuilder diet where it's chicken rice all the time, right? And then you'd have the cheat meal at night and be like, eat as much as you can.
Hmm.
You got to get that food volume down, man. Like at this point. So actually, this is a good story. I asked ChatGPT before I left. I was like, look, I'm going on this road trip. I don't really want to pack much food. Like, are there any like good practical suggestions so I can get my calories in? Expecting not to get anything. It gives me like generic stuff, and I'm like, I go through about a pound of honey a week and like
Hmm.
I can't keep my weight up like that. Like this doesn't work. It's like you could try freebasing sucrose. That might work. Which like I don't think you'd actually do that, but like you got to eat sugar. You got to be like, I brought honey and salt with me, right? Like
Hmm.
just pour honey on everything, eat the gummy candy, use like, if you got to put 200 grams of dextrose in your intra workout shake, do that, but keep the food volume down. The food volume is going, I could make an argument that the food volume is going to be not as deleterious to your health as the drugs, but like it's up there. It's substantial if you're doing it all the
Well,
time
from a comfort standpoint, for
for
sure.
the comfort standpoint for
Yes.
sure. But when you're walking around again with those flared ribs, with that shallow breathing pattern, with the constant sympathetic nervous system activity, like that's not good for your brain.
Did you have better luck with the sugar, or did you ever try fats?
I've done both. Yeah, I've done just spoonfuls of coconut oil mixed with peanut butter. Yeah, just like
Because that's another way to keep that. I mean, you just
yup,
throw it on the
yup.
oatmeal or
hmm
whatever it is, and
And
there's.
it's like, I mean, trying to keep my weight up is a full time job, which is why I don't do it anymore. Right? It's like whatever I weigh, I weigh. That's fine. I don't care.
Hmm.
Part of the reason why I don't really want to compete in open body, I don't want to eat like that. I don't want to feel like that. It's really uncomfortable. It looks cool, but that's it. It's just not worth it to me.
How did you feel when you won your pro card, though?
So, leading up to the pro card, or in the moment when I won the
The
pro card,
moment.
the moment. So when I was on stage for prejudging, they kept us up there for quite a while, and my strategy to control my gut was to literally not breathe. I was just going to hold my breath, or kind of exhale everything and hold that, and try to go through all the poses. So I make it most of the way through prejudging like that, and I finish in center, which typically means you win. And so I get off stage and like I almost pass out. Like I fall down and they got to catch me and they sit me down. And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I didn't use any diuretics, which I didn't. And I'm like, I wasn't breathing, right? I just
Hmm.
couldn't catch my breath. And so that was actually, this is fucked up too. That was a bit of an adrenaline rush. So I really liked that, right? Like that was a cool feeling. But after that, like it was a 2-day show. It was USA's in
Yes.
2021. The rest of the weekend, like it was fun the rest of that day because you're going and you're like, I pretty much have this locked up. This is cool. This is a good feeling. But then the next day, it's boring. It's a drag. You're sitting around in spray tan. You're hungry. You're tired. It's miserable. You get up on stage. It's like, it's basically just, kind of a cursory, let's check the boxes, right? For some classes, they'll rejudge, but they didn't for mine. So we're up to like midnight and I'm just, feeling lousy. I remember I was at that show with Taylor Groen, who was, kind of training with me at the time. Adam Bremer, who's the head coach at MI40, and Joe Sullivan and Brianna Taylor and Jared Feather. And so we get back to our place afterwards, and Joe and Jared and Taylor went off to go to a dispensary because it was in Phoenix and everything's legal there. And Brianna and I just come home because I want to eat. And I come home and we get to the Airbnb, and I walk in and I throw my plastic trophy, my $10 plastic trophy on the bed, and I tell Brianna, I am never fucking doing that again in my life, because all I wanted was the pro card to say that I did it, right?
Hmm.
Because like you said,
Hmm.
not many people have done it. And I did end up doing like a pro show to see what that was like. And that was more fun, to be fair. But it's like, there's no adrenaline rush. It's so boring. And honestly, like, I'm embarrassed being up there in a thong. I don't want to be there. I just want to win. Like that was my only motivation ever. So it was, and I don't want to make it sound like it was a bad experience. Like, I feel like as a person going through that, like, I learned a lot. I had a blast in some of the training, some of the travel, just amazing. But the actual act of being up on stage, it's not for me.
We live in some crazy times right now where there's not a day that I don't go on the internet and I see some BS crap about this research study or this research study. This isn't new. I've been in this industry for 4 decades. One thing that's helped me is 8 years ago, the mass research review started and became a godsend. The mass research team are professional researchers that are also meatheads. So they've done this great job of being able to take all these topics and put them into this research review that I get every month. I'm excited to partner with them. I spoke with Eric Helms about this on the podcast. It's simple, it's easy. They're offering a 20% discount to all podcast listeners. The code is elitefts20. When you join, you get the research review, which is going to be sent to you every single month. It has 7 to 9 articles in there. The archive, which is 1,500 articles, thousands of videos. Just head over to massresearchreview.com and use the code elitefts20. The link will be in the description. If I remember correctly, you my direction the questioning was going to be leading into that, what did you think was going to be next? But you kind of already answered that. The only other option for next is if you didn't win, to be able to go into a next show to win. Did you contemplate if you did win, what would be next?
So I did not have that thought in my head other than, hey, after I get this pro card, I can go back to powerlifting. And I get the pro card, and I remember the next morning I go for a walk, and it's early in the morning. I can't sleep. It's probably 6, 7 a.m. And I call my mom and I was like, hey mom, I won. And she's all excited. She's like, so what's next? And I'm like, I literally have no idea. I have no idea how I'm going to top this. And it's like, I don't really want to, it's like, you asked me yesterday, it's like, well, do you need to keep competing? Like, no. So are you going to keep pushing yourself to that extent? Like, isn't there like something else that you want to pursue? And it's like, yes, there is, but is it in the gym? Is it on stage? Is it on the platform? Probably not. Like, maybe, but I think more it would be for fun at this point.
As an outsider kind of looking in I think 18 to 12 months prior to that, it seemed like you and Tyler, is that right?
Taylor,
we're kind of like all over the place. I'm like, you were in like 4 or 5 different states over the year period. It looked like you were living the life, right? But in the back of my head, I'm seeing the weight too. And I'm like, oh man, this is great. He's all over the place, but is he not getting out of the car? You know what I'm saying? Like, so what, I know what I think, right? I know what everybody else was seeing. Like, this is the life, man. This is the way to go. But I also know what's in the back of my head. So what was the reality of that whole year?
So the reality is this, ask me, I'm pretty vulnerable here. I can do this. Okay. So,
because this is before the head popped off of everything.
Yes, right? Yes. So, leading up to USA's, right? So this is 12 to 18 months out. Stacy, who was my fiance at the time, we break up essentially because she doesn't want to be with the bodybuilder. Very understandable, right? It is different. And that's tough for me. That was the first relationship that, I sacrificed. That was like, maybe I don't want to pay this cost, right? And so I'm in my head like quite a bit. And I'm also living in Michigan, which I don't like, and I don't know because it's cold, and I don't know a lot of people there. And
let's pause on that, man, because there's when you're living in your head like that, there's 2 voices, right? There's the one like, I don't know if I want to pay the cost, and the other one's like, well, fuck it, I just lost everything. What's triple down, right? So it's like a balancing game.
Well, if I had been left to my own devices, I don't know what would happen there. So Taylor's like, look, buddy, we're not staying around hanging out here. Like, I don't want to be in Michigan forever either. We're going.
Okay.
And so we decide that we're just gonna go live the life. Like, we're gonna live it up. And so we plan this, like, there's 14 weeks on the road. So we leave Michigan, we go down to Tampa. I train at MI40 with Joe Bennett, leading up to the pro card. And it's the 6 weeks we spent in Tampa, man, some of the best 6 weeks of my life. I had such a blast. It was so much fun. You are living the life. Like, the stories that you read in those old books, like, that was it, man. I'm getting chills just talking about it. It was incredible. And then you go to Phoenix and you win the show after that, and you're like, well, how can life get any better than this, right? This is what I was built to do. And then the plan after that was that I was going to do another powerlifting meet. That was the goal. And so after that, we're headed up to Washington, and I'm going to train with Chris Duffin for the powerlifting meet. So, excuse me, not Washington, Oregon. So we get to Oregon, and I had booked us an Airbnb for, I think it was another 6 weeks. And we show up in Portland, and the owner, I guess, I don't know what the owner was thinking here. This Airbnb, there is someone living in it full time, and they're still renting it out. And there's no bed, there's no kitchen. It's like, what the? There's a basement with a couch. And so I have just come off, like I am literally 2 days removed from getting a pro card, and Taylor's like 6'3", 330, and we're in a basement. Like, that's not going to work, right? So I got to figure out what to do. And I'm like, you're not thinking right when you're in contest shape. Like,
Mm-hmm.
your brain doesn't really function all that much. And so I find us some corporate housing that's outrageously expensive in Washington State, right? So it's a good 30 miles away, like, not, and with traffic, that's a good hour plus to go train with Chris Stuffin. So I can't figure that out at the time, right? I'm just like, okay, let me find the closest gym that I can
Mm-hmm.
to train at. And it's Generation Strength in Vancouver, Washington, which is owned by Chris Bridford, who, another, top guy. I haven't talked to Chris, haven't seen Chris since Reckerberger, since like 2017, right? And we're good friends, just haven't been in touch because I've been bodybuilding. So I tell Taylor, it's like, look, we're going to go to Gen. I don't know if Chris is even going to remember me, but like, we're going to give it a shot. So we show up, and Chris is at the front desk, and it's like this, right? And he immediately stands up. He doesn't even say anything. He just gives me the big bear hug. And it's like, you find another gym that you really fit into that does actually have a crew. And again, like, my experience in Washington, man, again, getting chills, because it was living life, man. It was everything that I had hoped for in powerlifting and bodybuilding. Like, I really couldn't imagine a better experience for myself. And so you almost get kind of trapped in this winner's mentality, which I know sounds really dumb, but like, you feel invincible. You feel like you can do literally anything. And obviously you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, at some point, like, you got to pay the cost from this. And that is the single biggest thing that I have learned over my entire training career. Everything that you do has a price associated with it. And when you're starting out, when you're 13, 14, 18, 19, you have so many, biological resources in the bank. You're the equivalent of like a millionaire at least, right? And so you're paying these costs, and you don't even realize it, and you don't care. It's like, I got plenty of money in the bank. Who cares? Let's spend it. Let's have a good time. And then as you get older, and as you accumulate more responsibilities in life, and you realize that you have other goals, the prices get higher and higher, and your bank account gets lower and lower. And I was never paying attention to the bank account, which is really silly, because like, with actual money, I'm pretty conservative, but like, with my body, I was like, look, this is working. Let's keep going. Let's keep leaning in. Let's keep having fun. And eventually, and you can put off some of these costs, because you can use the drugs, and the drugs are like a credit card, right? So you keep going. They
Yeah.
really are. And so you can get yourself into credit card debt. And I just kept, I used every single thing at my disposal to keep going. And then eventually you got to pay those debts, right? And that's where things get dicey. And that's when you have to really start to reevaluate your life and everything.
So before we get there, when you were in Tampa and working with Joe, now you're dealing with a completely different training methodology. So now you're going to train like a bodybuilder instead of a power lifter that looks like a bodybuilder. How did you, or did you not embrace that?
Not at all. So what we would do, this was amazing. We would go in the morning. We would do Joe's workout. Sometimes it would be at Joe's gym. Most of the time, though, it was MI40. And then we go home and take a nap. And then we go to the powerlifting gym and do our real session. So I was squatting and deadlifting 8+ every
Yeah.
week of my prep up until 2 weeks out.
Yeah. So your credit card had a big limit on it. Yeah. Yeah. And did you, as you look back now, do you see from that style of training the benefit from that? If it was, let's say you do the main movements, but then you put that kind of stuff in, is what the accessories would be. A hybrid, I guess, is
Right,
where I'm
right.
going.
Do I think that's better than the traditional bodybuilding
You
approach?
think it would have been better for you to do that instead of just stacking these two sessions?
I think the optimal solution for me would have been somewhere in between, where you're not necessarily doing your main movement and your accessory work, and you're certainly not going. I couldn't buy into a full bodybuilding. I just don't have the mentality for that. But if you had some days where it was all bodybuilding and some days where it was all powerlifting and some days maybe where you're doing your GPP and your conditioning and then you're rotating through those, even if your training frequency is very high, even if you are doing multiple sessions a day, which we were,
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have been the most productive.
Well, at the same time, what you did worked.
It worked, right? But a lot of it worked because I was willing to push the drugs like that. And it's not like these doses were crazy. Like I want to say it was under 3 grams. If it was over 3 grams total, it was just over. And I'm not saying that's a low dose, but for a pro card, that's a normal dose, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can make that statement, but at the same time, everybody you're going to compete against is doing the same thing.
Exactly.
So it's not, what I'm saying, it's not a valid argument,
Right.
With that, because if you don't do that, then you're probably not going to.
Exactly. And I think it's another thing. It's like when I was reading your stuff coming up, I swear it was every week you'd had an article that would warn you. It's like, look, if you get into the sport, you're going to get hurt, right? And at some point, you are going to get hurt. And I was like, nah, I'm too smart for that, which obviously not the case. But if you have the mentality that you want to be the best, you're not going to care about those things. You're not going to care about the potential risks. They're not going to enter the equation, because if they did, I don't think it's possible to be the best. Like, I think those two are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, we're going to circle back to that one because we got to get through the rest of the story right here, because I don't know is the answer to what that is, right? Because we'll talk about it more, but there's the reason why I think what we'll say later is true, but getting the buy-in on the other side, I don't know if it's possible. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Not using the right words, but
yeah, it's because I think a lot of those prices still need to be paid, but you might be able to kick it further down the road.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
But with going back to where you were at that time, when did the wheels start falling off?
So I was living in Vegas, which again, like, didn't know a whole lot of people in Vegas. Vegas is not my type of place, right? Like, I'm not going to do rec drugs. I'm not going to gamble. Like, it's just not my type of place. And Vegas is not a community. Like, your chance to find a powerlifting crew there is like pretty much zero. I mean, it's just people stick to themselves because most people who come to Vegas are coming as tourists. So, and I was trying to really push the business hard. I was trying to do bodybuilding and powerlifting. I was trying to maintain a relationship. I just had too much on my plate, and I kept trying to put these costs all on the credit card. And I was like, it got to the point where I wasn't even running all that much gear. But I want to say it was like 500 megs a test, and then I was doing like 25 megs of Anavar a day or something as like a cruise, which obviously it's not, but like not an insane dose for a pro bodybuilder who's planning on doing doing a pro show. But I was so stressed out. I wasn't sleeping at all. I was smoking a lot of weed to manage my stress. I was trying to get the stress out through training.
Where was that coming from?
The stress?
Yeah.
Mostly the relationship.
Yeah.
And so it got to the point where in order to get out of bed and like to drive to the gym, I had to put on like those motivational speaker videos and just listen to those in my car, have them on my headphones 24/7. Cause like you feel awful. You got to have something to keep you going. And, I was able to maintain that for, I want to say July, August, September, about 5 months. About 5 months, I was able to maintain it. And then I had this one deadlift session where, the middle of the session, you could kind of feel something didn't feel quite right, but it wasn't that bad, right? It was halfway through the set. I think it was supposed to be 600 for 5 or something, on like a beltless stiff leg variation, something like that. And so like rep 2 or 3, I feel something kind of funky, but not enough to stop the set. And I finished the set. And I'm like, I feel fine. That was good, whatever. And then I still don't know exactly what I did on like a physiological basis, but that night, man, I am in the worst pain of my entire life. Like, I don't know that I clearly have some type of weird mentality, but I don't know that my pain tolerance was all that high. So I'm not saying like objectively the pain was inordinate, but it was more than I could handle. To the point where there was one night where I realized I was literally dissociating, like to kind of get away from the pain.
Where was the pain?
It mostly through my neck and the back of my head. Yeah, like just excruciating. And so, I basically I get prescribed prednisone for the pain. At the same time, I'm dealing. It's a period of 3 days, right, that I'm feeling like this, and I'm not even trying to train. I'm not doing anything. I'm basically comatose from this. Like I literally, it is beyond my tolerance. I don't know what to do. So I get prescribed prednisone, which does like within probably 36 hours, pain is gone, right? And then what I realize is the left side of my body, from my lat, which my lat's attached down near my hip, all the way up to my neck, does not work. And when I say does not work, can't do a push up, can't pick up a coffee cup, can't get the muscle to contract. Like you can't flex the muscle at all. And remember, like 3 days ago, I was pulling 600 for reps.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to the doctor again, and they don't really know what's going on. And Kelly Starrett actually messaged, because I posted something about it. Kelly Starrett messages me, and he sends this guy over, Gary Reinhold, who is the guy who originally came out with the, hey, let's not ice injuries, let's let inflammation do his thing. So he comes over, and he's got the machine that they use for the pro baseball players, the Mark Pro. And basically it's a very high-tech stim unit type deal. And so he's putting these on me. He's like, look, this is going to get the muscle to contract. That'll get some blood flow to the area. That'll release the pain and everything. So he hooks me up to the electrodes. Nothing happens. Like he's got this on full blast and not a darn thing happens. He puts it on the right side, the full contraction to the point where it's like a muscle spasm. Left side, it's like nothing is there. So he's like, I've never seen this before. I don't really know what's going on. And so he sends me, he's like, look, because the Mark Pro has little pads. He's like, look, you can replace the pads with needles. So if you got a guy and he can like dry needle you and attach the needles to the electrodes, that might work. So I did have a guy like that, and I apologize, man. I can't remember your name, but you helped me out big time. So he does that, and there's like the faintest twitches. And it's like, I think that's moving, maybe, kinda, but like there's almost nothing there, and it's still not.
So you couldn't contract it if you were just trying to flex your pec or your lat, nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Which, coming from a bodybuilder that knows how to contract, you know what I'm saying? That's a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Where any other athlete, maybe they know how to flex their pec or something like that.
Yep.
So there's nothing.
And I have no idea. I have no idea what to do. So I go to, I go back to the doctor, and I get told, like, look, this tissue is going to be necrotic if you let it go. Like, we can do an MRI, but likely what's going to happen is that you're going to need a cervical fusion. Like, well, if I do that, my career's over, my strength career's over, right? Like, so I'm not going to do that. So like, what are my other options? Like, we don't have any other options for you. So I'm training at Sin City Iron at the time, which is Stan Efferding's gym. And so I'm going in there, and I was like, I got to figure out something to do, right? Like, I got to get these. I still haven't learned how to deal with my emotions. I'm like, I got to get these out somehow. And a guy named Jake Benson's at the gym. And we had met through Joe Sullivan, and we had talked a little bit before, but like, Jake's methods were very different than what I was used to, and I just kind of, ignored them completely, because they were just too different, right? I wasn't open-minded enough about it, and I told him what was going on, because he's, like he's kind of like a quiet guy, but clearly like very, very smart. And I told him, and he's like, "Yeah, I can help you with that." I was like, and that's like all he said. I was like, "Okay, will you help me with that?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So remember, the left side of my body is not working. Jake drives me to the gym for 6 months to like take me through these sessions to get things like firing again. And we're able, like within that 6 months, to like actually get it working again, to the point where like the muscle will contract, but things aren't still quite right. There's still like some significant neurological issues kind of going on here. And it's been a process since then. So that was 2023. It's been a process, trying to kind of get back to full speed.
What did these sessions look like from the gym?
So at the very beginning, we were throwing a med ball back and forth, and I could throw the med ball with both arms, mind you, like probably 3 or 4 feet. And so Jake would stand about 3 or 4 feet away from me, and he'd toss me the med ball, and I could catch the med ball, and then I'd throw it back, and then he'd take one step back, and he'd throw me the med ball, and I'd throw him back, and then he'd take one step, and we do that until I couldn't get the med ball to him, and we just do that over and over and over again. And as we went, we got more and more, kind of complex with it. And most
it's gotta be frustrating as hell, though.
It was so frustrating. And it's like, you've talked a lot on the show about, kind of loss of identity. And it's one thing where it's like gradually over time you realize, hey, look, I'm not getting any stronger. I probably can't do it anymore. It's another one. It's literally overnight. And it's like, what is going on here? What's wrong with my body? Who am I? Like, it was rough. It was really rough. It was probably the single darkest time in my life. And I don't talk about that a whole lot, but like, I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I don't really align with the Catholic faith at all, but that was the one thing that really pushed me back in Christianity, was the fact that like, I don't know what I'm doing here, and I need somebody who's smarter than me that can kind of help me out. So, anyways, it was really really tough, and not all the sessions would be like that. I was talking when we were recording the the training video earlier. Sometimes I'll have the guys that I coach. Sometimes I'll have them, hey, look, you're going to go into the gym. You're literally going to fuck around. Like, I want you to take a buddy, go do whatever machine feels right, just get a pump, leave, don't think about anything. And a lot of my training was like that, because literally what we had to do was try to reprogram my brain so that the gym wasn't the be all and end all. Because when it is, your brain is holding so tightly onto, what keeps you safe, which is your training, that you're not going to ever be able to relax.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're doing this in the gym.
Exactly. So there's a really good article, I can't pronounce the guy's name. I think he's like Finnish or something like that. But he talks about clenching as like a stress coping mechanism. And he says he sees this, and it can lead to these sorts of problems where it's like you have these bizarre dysfunctions because you're so used to like clenching your muscles to deal with stress. And it's particularly evident, he says, in male powerlifters, because you get used to doing that in the gym, and like you start doing that outside of the gym as well. So you're holding onto the steering wheel and you realize like you are fully braced, squeezing the steering wheel like it's a 1 rep max bench while you're driving to the gym. And it's like, if you are doing that all the time, like you are going to develop some serious dysfunction.
Well, it's interesting because you can see how that happens because you're positively rewarded for that.
Exactly.
Over and over and over and over and over.
Yep. You have literally taught your brain, like, this is what I am supposed to do.
Yes.
And it is what you're supposed to do in the gym, but like, it can't be all the time. And I don't want to scare people like this. It, like I mentioned earlier, and you had at the beginning, it's like, well, you burnt out your kidneys running all that gear. My kidneys are fine. Like all my internal organs are fine with the exception of my brain. Like the organ that paid the price for all this gear use, for all this stress, for all this lack of emotional awareness, that was my brain. Right. It wasn't the heart. It wasn't the lungs. Like I've had the EKGs done. I've had the all the kidney tests done. Like all that stuff is fine. It was literally, we had these significant neurological issues that presented themselves as complete lack of function. And so most of the work that I had to do was neurological, but not neurological in the sense of, a lot of it was motor control, right. And things like that. But a lot of it also was just learning to deal with stress, learning to, identify emotions, learning to, have fun in the gym. And it's not always a life or death experience.
When did he bring that to you?
It was about, it was early on in the process. It was before that 6 months. And I was getting kind of frustrated. I want to say it was March. Okay. So this injury occurred right around Thanksgiving. I want to say it was March, and we were about 3 or 4 months into the process. And I told him, I was like, look, man, this is working, but it is so slow. I don't know that I can, do this forever. And he's like, look, I don't like to tell people this because it can be really intimidating, but a lot of times in order to overcome these types of injuries, you literally have to become a different person.
Dave Tate here from Elite FTS to talk to you about bands. We've been a supplier of bands for almost 2 decades now. So I've known my way around the band landscape. When I'm talking about bands, I'm talking about floss bands, long bands, short bands, bands you can use for resistance training, mobility training, body weight training, and flossing. One of our most popular bands, or actually our most popular bands, are the long bands. The long bands are typically used the most with squats, bench presses. Our floss bands are bands that you wrap around the joint to be able to help with mobility, circulation. And the short bands are designed for shorter range movements, bench press, deadlifts, and a lot of times people will use them with resistance machines to help accommodate the strength resistance curve. Head over to elitefts.com and look for bands in the toolbar or blowout menu.
And I'm like, I don't know that I can do that. And he's like, you can do it. It's just going to take a while. And it's taken a while, but I think if you talk to anybody close to me, I'm not the same person I was 4 years
ago. So he
ago.
built the trust before he had that conversation, because that conversation earlier would not have ended the same.
Correct.
Yeah. The analogy I like to make to that is, lifters will talk about lifting angry and stuff like that. And when you're younger, use what you have, right? But that's not the best thing, right? But if it's the only thing that you have, then use it. But while you're doing that, you're rewarding yourself for that. And if you continue to just use that, when you get to a stronger point and you have to actually think while you're doing the lift, you can't, because you're angry. And you can see this kind of play out amongst all strength athletes. You watch them, and then at a certain point you can see their emotional state's still aroused, but they are not in this angry state they
Which is
used
really
to be,
cool, right?
right? Because they figured out that they figured out what they're really supposed to do, but everybody uses what they have access to, that they understand, because your whole life you're kind of rewarded for that. Like if you get angry about something with your parents and maybe they shut up about it, and then you win, it rewards, ching ching, it always type of wins.
Yep.
And it works when you're younger and you fucking get all raged up before a lift. It works. So it's always rewarding, but you're kind of fucking your brain up. And
absolutely,
when you realize, most will realize it when they fuck a big lift up. It's like, oh man, what the hell did I do? Maybe I need to think about what I'm doing, right? But this is that caveat where if you try to teach somebody younger to be able to do that, then they don't have the arousal state to be able to do that.
Yes.
But on the flip side, if you can't figure out how to not do that, then you're going to destroy yourself and everything around you, right? Because it's constantly being rewarded with everything that you love. So if you're in a relationship, what's going to be the default? Anger, because it works every place else. Doesn't work there, right? So then it starts, fucking with your head, right? Because this is not supposed to go this way.
Yep.
This is supposed to work, right? And that's where if you don't have that trust built up, then the default, right, is if he would have presented that after like 2 weeks, fuck you, the anger default, right? Because that's where the reward comes in, even though you're fucked up and you don't realize that's why you're fucked up.
Yep.
Right? It's crazy.
That is absolutely it, 100%. But the cool thing is, if you do come out on the other side, and I think if you want to, everybody can come out on the other side, then you get to go back and you get to pick and choose what you want to keep and what you want to let go of, right? So if I want to, at this point, if I want to live for fun and I want to be a part of the community, and I don't want to put myself under an 800, 900 pound squat, I can be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
But you tell me that 4 years ago, it's like, no, you can't have one without the other.
Well, if we look at the output of what the anger is from a lifting standpoint, if we look at the output, the actual true output is confidence.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. And that's
100%.
all it is, right? So if you can have that confidence without that anger, then you have the same output.
Yes.
Right.
But you said at the beginning, like, I haven't been around for a while, because for those 3 years in between where I was trying to figure it out, I didn't have that confidence. I don't want to be out there.
Mm-hmm. That's because you're rewarded for the confidence from the other emotion,
Exactly.
right? And which makes sense though, right? Because you're not going to lift big weights depressed. You're not going to lift big weights sad. You're not going to, you can happy, but you don't understand. You get what I'm saying? That's a 100%. Big reach.
I don't know that I've ever heard someone explain it like so perfectly, because that's exactly it, right? It's very much a catch-22 situation, and it's.
But this is where I was going to a little bit earlier is it necessary? You know what I'm saying?
For me, it was. I can tell you, for me, it was. I would not. I couldn't have been a different person earlier. I could not. But is it for everybody? I hope not. I hope you don't have to go through that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where the identity. That's where all these other things kind of will come in. Is it that one emotional state? And the reason I ask that is because we can have these conversations, and younger lifters and so forth will hear these conversations. They'll absorb it, but they're going to be like we were, and they're going to be like, fuck you, you washed up old, all this other kind of shit. And it's like, no, man, it's not that, because I've had this conversation like 400 times with 400 different people that are all saying the same thing. And then if you look at some of the better strength athletes now in their mid 30s, you see what we're talking about. They're controlled, right? The arousal state's still there, right? But all the other price they have to pay isn't there.
Yep.
Or if they are using that, and they understand the back end price, like, look, I can do this for this training session, but I need to change this one, and this one.
Hey, if you understand that price and you decide I'm willing to pay it, I have so much respect for that.
Yeah, but I don't think they do.
Most people do not. Most people do not understand the price.
So how would you, because I think that's where the answer is. The answer isn't what we would wish it to be.
Right.
Like, figure this shit out, right? The answer is going to be, yes, it's still going to be there, but there's a trade-off, and the trade-off isn't a month. What is a month, a year down the line? The actual trade-off is whatever your next session's going to be, so how would you go about explaining that to somebody you're personally coaching?
I actually did this with a lifter, just couple months ago, and I haven't asked him if I could share this story because I didn't know it would come up, so I'm not
Hmm.
going to say his name. But he is the mindset that you and I have been talking about, right? I'm going to take my emotion out on the bar and gotten really good lifts that way, like 700 plus pound deadlift, 600 plus pound squat. So like good lifter, but kind of hit this plateau where it was like getting hurt a lot, getting frustrated, not enjoying the sport and everything. And I told him, I was like, look, we're going to take a step back. We're going to stop thinking about the numbers. I'm not saying your numbers going to go down. Your numbers going to go up. You got to trust me on this. But we're going to have to do some more work outside of the gym. And so I've been having him do stuff like, for example, he had a situation where he had a bad squat session, right, heading into a meet. It was a big meet, and he was feeling kind of frustrated because he went into that session very feeling very nervous about the weight on the bar, which everybody's
Hmm.
experienced before, and he felt like he kind of let that get into his head a little bit, and he felt like it was backsliding and everything. I was like, look, progress is never linear. The way we're going to go about this is not retaking the squat workout. The way we're going to go about this is you're going to go put yourself in a situation outside of the gym that's going to reproduce those, kind of feelings of anxiety. But there's not going to be any weight on the bar. There's not going to be any risk of injury. It's not going to be associated with the same feelings and the same experiences that you associate the gym with. So he's a coach himself. He had to have a difficult conversation with the client. That's what he
Hmm.
used as that. And he comes back the next week and he's like, look, I had this conversation with the client. It absolutely sucked, but I'm so glad that it was over. And then I had one of the best squat workouts of my life. And I've tried that approach with a couple other people, and it's worked pretty consistently. The problem with that is it's not generalizable. Like I need to know these people as lifters to be able to, or as people,
Hmm.
not as
Hmm.
lifters, to be able to give them that sort of guidance.
See, that's an interesting dilemma because he can, in that case, he can not have that conversation for a month and stress out over it for a whole entire month and be okay with that, but not okay with being uncomfortable for the 30 minutes
Yes,
that
yes,
it takes to have it go over, because the end result isn't going to be we we make up shit, right? So if there's any type of conflict, it's like, well, we're going to go to the worst case and then the best case. And in all cases, it's never the worst nor the best. It's always somewhere in the middle. We all kind of inherently know all this,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
But we'll spend a month focusing on this and this instead of actually doing the thing, which makes no sense. After a while, it makes no sense. Like I'm guilty. Everybody's guilty of the same type of thing. But if you go through that enough, and this is, I think, where you're going, if you have them do it in different places, you
Yes,
do that enough
yes, yes.
times, you get enough reps, then you
That's exactly.
realize I need to lean into this to get it over with, good or bad, but at least it's over.
And that is exactly right. And I said just a second ago, it's not generalizable. You can make some stereotypes here, right? A lot of people get into powerlifting because they have anger management issues. A lot of people get into bodybuilding because they have, kind of insecurities. And so if you can force these people to confront those issues outside of the gym in different contexts, a lot of times it does help them to, not see the gym as this, kind of be all end all solution to their lives.
Eventually, they're going to deal with it
Yep. Yep.
at some point
Yes.
in
And
their
so if you
life.
can, as a coach, if you can push them in that direction, and push isn't a good word, lead is a better word, right? If you can do that, to me, that's what, kind of the live, learn, pass on. That's the
Hmm.
best way I found to, kind of fulfill that role.
So it's when you have that, and everybody has this brain, right? But when you have that brain, it never goes
It never
away,
goes away all the way.
right? So it's how do you navigate that, for yourself now as you're trying to move forward, trying to figure out what to do.
That's what I'm doing right now. That's why I'm here.
How
I'm
so?
serious.
How so?
Talking about it. You got to talk about
Hmm.
it with you.
So when you have those conversations with other people, like you just said there, you have, by getting these stories out, right? Then you have the credibility that they're going to be able to relate to all that,
Yep. Yep.
right? But if that's not there, just say it's a friend of yours, that you're having this conversation with.
That's a great question. That I can't answer that one for you. I don't know. If I did, I probably wouldn't be here, right?
Well,
Like
it's weird though, right? Because the people that you're closest to, you would think it would be easier.
the people that you're closest to are always going to have your back. They're always going to be supportive. They're not necessarily going to tell you the hard truths that you need to hear.
Yes.
If you have a friend that's willing to do that, that's huge. Most people aren't going to do that.
Have you found that to be the case?
I have, yeah. Most
So
people,
have I.
yeah, yeah. And
Especially when you're successful in the endeavor that you're in,
makes
right?
it so much harder, man. And like that sounds awful, right? Oh, I'm so successful that now I can't interact with people. That's dumb, right? But like it
No,
is
but
one
it's
of the,
true
yeah,
though, right? Because a
yes,
lot of people aren't going to give you advice on your training because fuck, you're a pro, you've had all-time
yep,
world record, but
yep.
they've gone through the same experience, but maybe only have a 400-pound squat, and they can kind of see it, but they're not going to say it, right? Now the strangers will, like, not strangers, loose acquaintances, they will, right? Because they had nothing to lose,
Absolutely,
right? Where
absolutely.
the people closest to you is like, well, I don't want to get engaged in this debate or argument,
Yep,
which
yep.
it may have been 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but it won't now because your perspective is shifted. And you're like, no, man, tell me where I'm fucking up. And they're like, no, I don't want to do that. I tried to do
Well,
that 5 years ago and you bit my head off. You get,
John did that to me. Very, he was right to do it. And I asked Shelby. Shelby coached me for my pro card. I was like, "Look, can you help me with my training? Like, I'll pay for it." And he's like, "You're gonna know better than I would." And it's like, is that true? I'm sure I could learn a lot from Shelby, but it was smart of him to be like, "No, we're not going to go down that road. I'm going to manage the diet. You're going to do what you're going to do with the training."
what's interesting though, because when you look back on those people that were around you and think hard, many times they were trying to tell you the things that you needed to hear, but you phased it out.
I mean, that was you, right? You told me over and over and over again. I was like, nah, nah, nah. I remember it was right when I was hitting my stride, right back
Mm-hmm.
2016, 2017 was, it wasn't this compound, it was the old one, right? And you were telling me like, look, you need to stop thinking about the next meet. You need to plan out your next 3 or 4 years. You need to be content with like slower progress because you're at the level where progress is going to be slower and then you're going to be successful. I was like, no, next meet
Mm-hmm.
is it.
So
I was like,
what could have been said to be able to make that message better? Because I'm further removed than what you are right now.
right, right. For me as an individual, like,
Well, for anybody that's in that mindset,
oh man,
which would start for you as an individual.
I think that comes back to the identity question. Like you need to be able to separate your identity from your performance because if you can do that, you're going to be able to take advice, even if it's the advice that you don't want to hear. And you can talk to people who are like in it, right? And I think well, I know for me, there was this one time where I was. This was before I ran anything, but I was still. Like I said, I finished second 2015 Raw Nats for the USAPL, so I was still a good lifter, natural. And I was in grad school, and a guy comes in and he wants to learn how to. He's a journalist who is fascinated with learning to with dunking, like in basketball, and he wants to learn to dunk a basketball, and he knows he needs to get stronger for that. So he actually came to talk to Terry, and he wanted Terry's advice on strength training. And Terry's like, well, you know what? I haven't been in the strength world for a long time now. I'm in academia, but you should talk to Ben. So he talks to me about programming stuff, and he's a journalist, so he's trying to get my story and everything. And he asked me at one point, he's like, "You're clearly very passionate about this. What do you think would happen if like you were just kind of get hurt training, you could never do it again?" And I told him at the time, I was like, I would be fine. I think I have enough going on in my life that if I had to give this up, I could walk away. And he looks at me, he's like, "I don't think that's as true as you think it is." And he was right. He was 100% right. But I couldn't see it at the time.
I think the hack is people like yourself need to be talking about those things because you're still more relatable, big jacked and all the other kind of stuff. You get further removed, you get older, right? Further away, then it becomes, not as the the message is the same, but the messenger's different and it's more relatable because it's what that person aspires to be. And they can see that right there instead of
Absolutely.
it's advice compared to wisdom. The wisdom's going to be better if it's 20 or 30 years down the road, but it's not going to stick because the message isn't as relatable for what's right there. And that's just fact,
You
you
know,
know.
the other thing for me personally, I don't know how true this is for everybody. A lot of guys talk about how the gear makes them more aggressive or, irritable or stuff like that. The gear only ever made me more confident. And so, I'd be running all this dose. I'd feel like I can do anything I want. I'm never going to hit the ceiling, right? Like that was always the feeling that I got from gear, which is part of the reason why I ran so much of it, right? It
Mhm.
was like, if all you're experiencing is confidence and success, like, why aren't you going to take more? And it's, well, you don't know what you're doing internally. Even if your blood work comes back perfect, even if, you pass all the tests, you don't really know the full repercussions of that
So
in the moment.
even with that though, you never pushed it to a point to where it was like, oh shit, this is too much.
So after
Because
for
it will invert. It goes sideways if it's too much.
for that pro card run, I was on trend for I want to say 12 weeks total. For most of it was like 400 megs a week, which is way too much.
Hmm.
And the last week it was like 700. And I was still fine all the way through. And then I told you about that experience with the Airbnb where it was double booked.
Hmm.
I had also rented us a car through Turo that was it was a Leaf, a Nissan Leaf, and I was excited to use an electric car because I'd never driven one before. Well, the thing was so old that it had a 40-mile range, right? And we're trying to drive 25 miles each way to Chris's
Hmm.
gym. So it's just not going to work. And I'm, less than a week out of a show, and I'm just coming off of some insane dose of tren, and like I pull over at a red light, and I don't remember if I scream or hit the steering wheel or whatever, but it's like obvious, like just like this is too much. And Taylor's with me in the car, and he's like, buddy, you got to chill out. And that's really the only time Taylor's ever told me to chill out. So it's like,
So
then
you
I
kind
knew
of
it
were
was too
feeling
much.
it,
Yeah.
because there were times with myself to where it was it was it was too much to the point to where I'm trying to put the dots together, and it's like if I'm this stressed all day, then I'm not going to have the recovery from the sessions that are creating more stress. It's like this is just too much.
Right, right.
Right. And it was, and I couldn't recover from those normal sessions because this was just too fucking high.
I didn't ever, I just wasn't aware enough or just didn't care enough to be cognizant of that. I talked to Charlie Jong on the way up here. We were training in Jersey, and he called it the burden, which I like. It's like when you're running that much gear, it almost feels like you are carrying a heavy load on your back 24/7. And because it's 24/7, at some point you kind of stop paying attention to it, but it's still there. And you don't really realize it until you come off. And then you're like, oh, wow, this feels a lot lighter. This is kind of nice.
So this is going to be a little bit more of a deep question. Have you figured out how to live, train, move forward with everything without suffering? Because
Suffering.
well, that's another thing, right? Because the diet's a suffer, the training's a suffer, the injuries a suffer. You have no problem with straining, no problem with suffering,
Right,
right?
right.
And again, that's like the anger thing. It's being rewarded,
Sure, sure.
right? To
Right.
where if you're taking on a different task, we all know we're going to have to suffer to a certain degree, but some people will make that suffering harder and worse than what it really needs to be because they think that's what it has to be able to move forward.
I may still be doing that. I do like suffering.
You get what I'm saying,
Yes,
though?
I
Because
do. I
you'll
absolutely get what you're
compound it when it doesn't need to be compounded
Yes, yes.
because it will
The
take you in this other gear.
I've thought about suffering quite a bit, but usually what I think about it is people try to run away from it, right? They try to eliminate it completely. And I don't think that's right. But I also think what you're saying is right. A lot of us in powerlifting, especially, I think we lean into it. Like we try to we look for reasons to suffer. And maybe I still do that to some extent. I'm not sure.
Well, I
have to
think
about
that
more.
it's always there, right?
It's
So
always there. Well, part of life is suffering, right? I don't
all
think
of
you
it.
should try to avoid it, but you also should not try to compound it.
Yeah,
That's definitely correct.
I've used the example before. It's like it's like if your backyard's all grass and then dog shit is the suffering, right? So most people just try to avoid the dog shit, but the reality is all the grass is grown on fertilizer, which is shit. So it's all shit.
Yep.
So it's always there.
Yep.
And for me, it's just if you realize that it's always there, and then the nice times are the ones that don't have that, and they're more rare than the other. You got to inverse it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then you embrace it, and then a lot of it's not even suffering. It's
Right.
just the shit that you have to do to be able to move forward.
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely agree with that.
Yes.
That's
So it's
completely-
the trick is to not compound it.
right.
You know,
right.
it's like make this more than what it is. Like it's just a conversation. You know,
Yes,
with the one
yes.
example that you're using, it's
Right,
just a
right.
conversation. It's not like this huge life altering event.
I see what you're asking now. Okay. So I'm just going to give a very honest answer here. I'm not recommending that other people do this. But yeah, DMT is very useful for working through that.
How did you come to that conclusion? Or when did it come in when the neck was,
Yeah.
the nerve, or whatever it was?
So we were about a year and a half into the process, and still, kind of getting better, but still not there. And again, when I say the process, it's not just the physical; it's also the psychological. And Jake suggested, it's like, look, this could really push the needle forward for you. And he was referring to 5-MeO DMT. And I was in Florida at the time. And again, haven't asked him if I could say this, so I'm not going to mention his name, but there was a shaman that I trained with, like an actual shaman who had been trained in providing Bufo is the spiritual name or whatever. So I did a session of that, which was like You know, I sound silly saying this because people talk about psychedelics and will be like, yeah, it's a life changing experience. And like, you're a dumb hippie, right? It was a life changing experience. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the way that it works essentially removes your ego from the equation entirely so that you can experience life without life, the universe, whatever, without, your kind of your brain getting in the way, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes. And having that, it's powerful stuff, man. And the realization that you get coming out of it is, I am taking this way too seriously. This meaning life, right? And it's like, it's a powerful enough revelation that what 2.5 years later, it still sticks with you. And like, when you do get in those situations where it's like, man, this is really heavy, like I'm compounding the shit, you can step back from it a little bit. I'm sure there are ways to do that without psychedelics, but that was my route.
Was it immediate?
Immediate in terms of
As
that
far as
realization.
that, yeah, that realization.
So there was about the way it works. If people haven't done this before, so you're sitting on like a little pillow, like on the floor, so the shaman, he's like, look, I'm gonna hold the pipe. We're gonna say a prayer first, right? And it's just a generic prayer. I'm gonna hold the pipe for you, and then you're gonna smoke it. And I'm like, I can hold a pipe myself, man. He's like, no, no, you're as soon as you smoke this, like it's gonna start. And so he does that, and like I'm inhaling, and he's like, "You got to inhale more." Inhale. So I'm still trying to inhale, and while I'm inhaling, all of a sudden the world just like disappears. Right? It's just gone. And for the first like 10 or 15 seconds, it's like absolutely terrifying. It feels like, oh wow, I am dead. Like that's the closest that I can get to describing this. Like you are just dead. You are gone. And then some degree of consciousness without that ego comes back, and that is one of, if not the most powerful experience that I've ever had in my life. Like it was something. It was something. So yeah, pretty much immediate.
How long?
In terms of like actual time,
Hmm.
10 or 15 minutes. But like I come
Did
out
it
of it,
feel like 10 or 15 minutes?
I came out. I was like, it could have been 10 or 15 minutes. It could have been an entire day. I had no concept of time whatsoever. I had no idea.
So when you're in it, do you know you're going to come out of it, or are you like freaking out because you think you're going to be permanently stuck?
No, to be quite honest with you, the feeling was like, if I had been there forever for all of eternity, I would have been okay with that.
So then after that, the reason I asked that is I can remember a few times when I'm super fucking high and I start freaking out because I'm going to be stuck like a retard for the rest of my
I
life.
like on marijuana.
Yeah,
No, not even remote.
you know, where it's
That's so we call that noided. Like that's the term that I learned in Michigan. It's like you smoke too much, you get noided, you get paranoid, right? And it's like all you do in that, you just lean in, and eventually it will pass. And yeah, you're paranoid. And I always think of it as like you're on a roller coaster and you're going up to the top of the roller coaster. And you have that feeling in the pit in your stomach, like you'll be okay eventually. Just ride
yeah.
it out,
And
right?
when you're in it, you think
It's
you're going to be a retard the rest of your life. You're like, oh man, how am I going to explain this to everybody that I can't formulate a vow?
it's absolutely nothing like that.
Mhm.
Absolutely nothing like that. It's you know this sounds so dumb also, but it's like the best way I can describe it is just like the purest feeling of love for the world that you can imagine.
So then when you come out of it, I mean, you throwing up or any of those things?
No. So that's ayahuasca.
Mhm.
So I have done changa before, which is the active ingredient ayahuasca mixed with an MAOI inhibitor, so that you can smoke it, and that way you don't throw up. I don't like throwing up. I don't want to throw up. Some people say it's very powerful. Again, I've had good experiences, so very well it may be, but I don't need to do
So
that.
when you say life changing, like the rest of that day, what's going through your head?
Still, oh, the rest of that day,
Yeah.
it's just kind of like a feeling of lightness. It's just like you want to talk with people, you want to be around people, you don't like even the shit doesn't feel like shit anymore. It just feels like grass, and it's like you can see the shit for what it is, but it's like that's cool. The shit has a purpose in life too, and you're okay with that. It's like it really feels like you can understand how you fit into the universe a little bit better. I swear to everybody watching, I am not a hippie. Okay, I
Mhm.
promise you. It really was a powerful experience for where I was at in that point in life.
So you mentioned yesterday the microdosing,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
so how does that fit
So
into
that's
this?
completely different, completely different. So that's really using more of the neurological benefits of and that would be NN-DMT to kind of help push the needle forward in a training context. So when we're talking about the neurological aspects of training, whether that's creating a high level of contractile output, whether it's neuromuscular coordination, all of these things are going to involve your brain to a significant extent, right? And for many of us, we will develop inhibitions to that because we have taught ourselves that it's not safe. So if we go back to my squatting example, that crazy grip that I used, well, the reason I used that grip was because my brain didn't feel like it was safe to get my shoulders in an externally rotated position because I had messed my shoulders up doing, crappy, terrible pull-ups 10 years ago. And so I just wasn't able to get in the position. I found something else that, kind of worked for it. And then I'm going squatting, squat after squat after squat. My brain's learning, hey, look, this is the safe position. Let's stay here, right? Well, you stay there forever. Eventually you accumulate injuries down the chain somewhere because your squat grip looks like, I don't know, a monkey dying or something like that. And to work through that, you can do a billion reps, not literally a billion, but the analogy that I use is the NBA player who shoots 1,000 free throws after practice. You need that level of repetition because you're not only trying to learn a new habit, you have to unlearn a bad habit at the same time. The cost of that long-term potentiation is very, very high, and you can pay some of those costs with the DMT. It's literally going to decrease the inhibition, and it's going to allow you to it's going to allow your brain to feel safe in these new movement patterns faster. I'm not saying it's immediate, it's not overnight, it's not, the same depth of experience that I was talking about at kind of a personal level or a spiritual level. But it is helpful, right? You can see some benefit session to session to session. And again, the cost of that type of stuff, biological cost, the cost of internal, very, very low, if at all. You can make the argument that it's actually going to be neuroprotective and decrease neuroinflammation versus any sort of effect that it's going to have, any sort of negative consequences that it's going to have.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, if we use a squat as an example, we use something different. We use a bench as an example. You're trying to change somebody's bench technique, right? And they've done it the same way for a decade and they've been successful. As you're trying to change that technique, part of their brain is going to always resort back to what they've always done. It's always been rewarded. It's always worked. If they use that, then that voice is going to be it's going to be turned down to allow more focus on the actual task that you're trying to do.
I wish I'd brought some so you could try it. It's gonna lower the volume. It's not going to turn it down to 0. It's going to turn it down from like 11 to 10 or 10 to 9, right? It's one notch because you can't go like, if you have a full on DMT experience, you're not going to be able to. It has to be low enough that you don't even really notice it at a conscious level, just enough, which is true for all microdosing, right? A lot of people will use microdosing as an excuse to be high all the time, right? They're saying, I'm going to do a microdose of shrooms that's like 0.5 gram. It's like, no, bro, you just want to be high, right? If you're doing 100 milligrams, well then, okay, yeah, maybe that is enough of a microdose that you're going to see some benefits.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a moment because we do read the comments, and one of them that keeps popping up more frequently than not is, I can't believe this video doesn't get more views. Take a minute to subscribe, leave a comment, and share. It really does help. If you were to lay out your training now, like you were training for the current, right? How would you lay that out differently with what you know now?
It would look nothing. I don't even think you could compare the two. That's not a fair statement. You could compare the two. My max effort work would probably stay the same. I think I got the max effort work right. That was probably the only thing. But that max effort work, instead of being like 90% of my sessions, it would be more like 20% of my sessions, which is, obviously a very conjugate thing. And I do think that
now, when you say that, would we say once a month, or because that would be 20%, right?
Right.
Or are you talking? How are you defining that 20%?
Probably twice a month. Probably twice a month. But I like higher frequency training, so probably twice a month. And then there would be significantly more emphasis on the type of restorative sessions that we filmed today. So I think these should probably come out around the same time, so people will be able to go look exactly what I'm talking about. But that's going to involve things like more like plyometrics, more like speed work, and not even traditional speed work. So I said on that video, the speed work that I recommend for this kind of restorative stuff, instead of using like 45 to 55% bar weight plus your accommodating resistance, that's your total limit, is 45 to 55%. So you got to include the bands there. So it's almost like insultingly light is the phrase that I like.
Then what's the intention of that? Is it still that super high compensatory acceleration, or is it going to
No.
be dialed down some?
No, the goal of that is to allow you to suffer in a way that's not going to beat yourself up. Because for me, the reason I did max effort work all the time, I knew it wasn't optimal, but I needed that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I needed that to feel okay. And again, if you guys watch the video, like if you do it the right way, you can do this restorative work and it can feel like I just did a session, like I feel pretty good, right? You can get those feelings without having to beat yourself up. And the other benefit of it is that it is going to help to pay some of the cost of the other type of training that you need to do. So this is the third thing that I would change.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually be doing like really high intensity cardiovascular work, not the whole time, but like until 6 weeks out, there would be a really strong emphasis on cardiovascular work and on glycolytic conditioning so that I would be able to tolerate those higher rep ranges without getting to the point where I really beat myself up. And that glycolytic work, in my opinion, and actually we've had this conversation
Mm-hmm.
as well, if you're doing it in a powerlifting context, if you're doing sets of 15 on squat and you're holding that brace for multiple sets of 15, that is more costly than doing your 1 rep max attempt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then at least it's over in 10 seconds. Here you're holding that brace for 5 minutes over the course of the entire training session. So you got to pay that cost somehow, and you can pay that with the restorative sessions, in part with the
Mm-hmm.
restorative session.
So then, where are the main sessions?
The
Because you
ma-
got max effort, you got
Yes.
restorative.
So the main for me, and I don't know this is true for everybody, for me, the main sessions really, and this is so difficult. I still don't know if I could do this. The main sessions need to come on an as needed basis. And so, in other words, if you have that day where just everything happens to align, you slept great, work has been, pretty chill, you don't have any obligations, that's when you can take your max effort work. If you try to pre-schedule it, if you say, my max effort work is on Thursday and it's going to happen on Thursday no matter what, for me, I'm going to end up overreaching. I'm going to end up getting hurt. So I don't need that many exposures. And again, this is now. This is not back then.
Yeah.
But this is now. I don't need that many exposures. My deadlift technique is going to be the same. I've done enough reps. I've done enough free throws that like if I deadlift, light 3 weeks out of the month, that's enough for me to be able to turn it on for that heavy session. And then obviously when you get into the last 4 to 6 weeks, then it's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe you do need to schedule these. But for the vast majority of that, for the other, 10 weeks of the prep, you got to feel comfortable. You got to feel confident enough to not do that.
What about the hypertrophy work?
The hypertrophy work, are you talking more in terms of like accessories?
Yeah.
Yeah. I still just, I kind of bullshit that stuff still. There are a couple of accessories.
Well, define bullshit that stuff, because the way that you would define that
That is
be
true. That is,
completely
yeah, no, you're right. Okay. So if it is not directly going to improve, you use the terms accessories and supplemental lifts differently. Can you remind me?
Supplemental lifts would be the lifts that are directly under the main list that have correspondence. A stiff leg deadlift, maybe a board press, something like that.
Okay.
The accessories are going to be like lats and just the other dumb.
Yeah.
We're going to define it. The other dumb shit
Okay.
that kind of has to be done, but maybe not.
Yeah. So that other like lats, biceps, shoulders, all that stuff. Like if I feel like it, I'll do it. That's the extent of it. And even as a bodybuilder, like if I feel like it, I'll do it. But there are some movements that I think fall kind of in the middle. And again, I was talking with Noah about this. Like for me, a GHR, that's pretty darn close to a main lift. If my GHRs are going well, my squat and deadlifts are going well 100% of the time. Right. And so those I am going to program pretty intentionally. Another movement like that for me is triceps. If I can find a really good tricep movement that's not a press, I'm going to lean into that really hard. And I got a friend at the gym, Flex Gym, and you guys just had Zach on a couple months ago. Like he makes fun of me because I am doing so many skull crushers that it's like I'll spend half an hour doing skull crushers because I see a very direct benefit from those. But the other stuff, like I don't know, a chest supported row. Like if I see a cool chest supported row machine, I'll do it. But like otherwise, I just don't care. And I don't know that that's transferable. Like I have good lat insertions. My lats aren't a limiting factor. I don't do that much lat work and think that it's beneficial.
Well, I think the takeaway is if you're putting enough effort / intensity, however that wants to be defined, into those main things,
right,
you're kind of covering all those other bases.
I like for me, a hack squat's directly going to carry over to my squat. So I'll program hack squats like a main lift. And I think most people would consider them an accessory. But like a leg extension, they're very valuable for bodybuilding. I think leg extensions are great for bodybuilding. I would almost never, unless my knees hurt, I'm not doing them as a powerlifter.
Well, I think the trick with that from what everybody's kind of been saying over the years is you got to figure out the movements that do have that correspondence and then make those a higher priority. But
Yep,
the only
yep.
way you're going to find those out is by doing a whole lot of different things and
Yes,
paying
yes,
attention.
yes.
So it's, how do you, if you're working with somebody, how do you sprinkle in different movements to figure out what has that correspondence?
Mm.
And then what intensity does that have to be trained at, or effort, however you want to define that,
How long can I talk about this for?
as long as you want.
Okay. So, in my opinion, there is way, way, way too much emphasis on biomechanics nowadays, where you can go online and you can find a million different influencers talking about the angle that you're training at and the direction of the muscle fibers and all this other stuff. And I'm not saying there's no value in that. I'm just saying there are too many variables involved and there are too many unknowns involved. And I talked about this on another podcast very recently, but if you look at kinesiology as a field, a lot of the field has not been quantified. A lot of this, like going back to the 1950s when the field just was actually being, kind of consolidated in academia. A lot of this is tacit knowledge. And so, in other words, it's something that you learn by being in the weight room, by being around other people, by watching. So I'm at the point, I've been doing this for 25 years and you've been doing it for, I don't even know how, a lot longer than me.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at, and Louis is famous for this. You can look at people and know what they need,
Mm-hmm.
right? To a large extent. And that's what I'll tell them. If I'm coaching them one-on-one, I'll be like, look, I actually cannot explain why I want you to do this, but I want you to do this. I'm pretty confident it's going to work. If it doesn't work, we'll do something else. And the number of times it doesn't work, it's pretty low, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the worst case is, okay, we crossed this off the list. This isn't the one we need to do. Let's go on to the next one. So it's not really trial and error, but it is tacit knowledge. It's not something that I can write down and somebody who's just starting out can be like, okay, this is how you do that, right? It's something that you got to have, kind of eyes and hands on the person to be able to understand. And I don't think that's going to be true forever. It's just that, relative to fields like biology and physics, like kinesiology is very, very new, right? We're like 200 years behind. So give us another 100 years and you probably will be able to quantify with a very high degree of certainty, a very high confidence interval, like what accessories should go for what person in what contexts. But right now, I think
There's a lot of variables, man,
so
because
many variables.
what is their skill? What is their
Exactly.
ability to contract?
Exactly.
The ribs,
Exactly.
how do they hold there's a lot of variables.
And if you go online, you're going to say, this is an S tier exercise. Everybody should do this. It's like, no, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true at all. I think there are probably a couple of exercises that I could be like, no one should do that. That's really dumb. That's not moving the needle forward for anyone, right? But that would be something like, I don't know, a close stance Bosu ball squat or something like that, right? I'm never going to have a powerlifter do that. I'm sorry. Maybe there's a context for it. I don't know what it is. But for the most part, I think most exercises have a purpose if they're used properly.
Mm-hmm. So when you're saying that, what if we transfer this into the bodybuilding realm instead of the strength realm?
So that is, I think, my philosophy towards bodybuilding, I think, is pretty unique. And again, this is largely driven by the guys the bodywork guys that I worked with in Vegas. In my opinion, and again, I do not have formal evidence to back this up, right? You can look at the literature. Most of the literature is in Italian. I can't read Italian, so this is at best third hand for me. In my opinion, the limiting factor for growth, not in like in an absolute sense, not in the sense of kind of getting to be a 300-pound open bodybuilder, but the limiting factor for having delts that look really good or having kind of triceps that look really good and can grow on a regular basis if you're eating right, that sort of thing, you're recovering right, that sort of thing. It's usually driven by your fascial integrity. And so what I mean by that is, for most of us, and this is especially true in powerlifting, it's especially true for me, when we go to contract the triceps, there's going to be some degree of co-contraction, right? So for the triceps, if you're doing, like, let's say a skull crusher, there's going to be a little bit of lat in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing rear delt, there's going to be a little bit of trap in there. And the more you do that, the worse, from a bodybuilding standpoint, the more kind of faded and washed out your lines are going to look. And the best evidence that I have for this, if you look at the guys who do, kind of dog crap training, I'm not knocking on Dante. I have a ton of respect for Dante. You look at those guys, most of those guys have like no lines because all their training is heavy, very little isolation work. And when there is isolation work, the goal is only progressive resistance, never getting in that mind muscle connection. That is actually really, really important, not because you're going to get a higher level of contractile output, but because you're going to have a more isolated output. And that is going to help you to, kind of build that shape that you're looking for. Once you have a level of fascial integrity that is like very, very, very high, then I think you're going to be able to choose any exercise. Well, you're going to be able to choose the optimal exercise. And this is, again, go find some other influencer that's going to tell you the optimal exercise and it's going to work for you. But like, until you get to that point, you're really going to struggle. And I am sure that 99% of the people watching this can relate to it. You have tried I don't know, the supinated incline dumbbell curl that's supposed to put your bicep at the exact angle, and you're like, I don't feel anything. This is all in my forearm, something like that. Well, it's probably because you don't really know how to differentiate the muscles in your forearm to the muscles in your bicep. You're always firing them both at the same time. I know I do, right? Most of us, especially at the lower levels, have these habits. And so in order to kind of break these habits, you got to choose an exercise. I really don't care what exercise it is. For me, it's lat pull downs. I am going to do 1,000,000 reps of lat pull downs. Again, the guys at Flex make fun of me for this. I will be on the lat pull down machine for an hour, and I will keep doing lat pull down after lat pull down after lat pull down until I find a rep where it feels like, okay, I can feel my lat working and nothing else is working. And once I get that feeling, I will hold it for as long as I can, and then I'll stop. And I'm not going to try to get more than that. That is my PR for the day, is where I can feel my lat working in isolation. And I will do that for whatever body part. I don't care what the exercise is. I need to be able to feel that in isolation. And it's going to be different for everybody because everybody's going to be asymmetrical in a slightly different way. That's kind of unavoidable, right? We have that natural asymmetry of our organs in our rib cage. And so ultimately, I think all of bodybuilding comes down to your ability to maintain a neutral rib cage position while you're lifting heavy. If you can do that, you're going to be able to pose properly. You're going to be able to, kind of emphasize the muscle groups that you want to emphasize. You're going to be able to grow the muscle groups that you want to grow. But getting there is it is a long, long, long process because it's not just every single muscle either. You have to be able to train every, every muscle in every context. So for example, you're going to be able to need to feel your hamstrings working. The difference between feeling your hamstrings working on a lying leg curl versus a seated leg curl, because the function is different. You got to be able to do that for every individual muscle group. And some people are going to have the genetics such that they are just naturally very symmetrical and they naturally have that kind of connection. And some people are going to have absolutely no connection whatsoever. And again, for me, I think I'm not trying to grow. That's the problem. I can't prove, we had this conversation earlier. You got to look the part for people to buy in. I don't want to grow. I don't want to put on that weight again, but I really do believe that if I wanted to, and I were willing to spend this weight on, I could put together a pretty darn good physique, a lot better than what I've done. I'm not saying I could be Mr. Olympia, but I think the differences between when I won my pro card and using this type of style of training, I think it would be like, oh, wow, he's really doing something that's working. So that, I don't know how well that answers your question, because it's not something that I know.
No, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. If we're talking the bodybuilding, or if it's a strength athlete, those low end, the last movements you're going to do is some strategies that I'll use, because if I'm understanding you correctly, you need to actually train the muscle you're trying to train. You need to feel it
without training the other muscles.
Without training the other muscles. So some strategies that I'll use with that is, let's say it's a lat or it's a chest supported row, whatever it is. If you're trying to work the lats more, biased than the upper back, then start with where you feel the stretch in the lats.
Yep.
And then when you start the movement, contract the lats. Don't use the momentum. So you're going to use a little bit lower tempo.
Yep.
You got to figure out if it's actually doing what you want it to do.
Right.
And then when you contract it, is it contracting where you want it to contract, or is it not contracting? And you can, if you're working with somebody, you can see.
If you're working with somebody, it accelerates the process so much.
Oh my God.
Not only can you see, you can goad the person, right? Poke them in their lat. Be like, no, use this, right?
Yes.
That helps a lot.
And if they're not muscle fucking the thing, they'll be able to actually find where that is.
Right.
And at the end of the set, if they do a loaded stretch or whatever, they can feel it even more so. And then once you lock in what that's supposed to feel like, then you can start adding more load.
Yes.
But I don't even know how important that really is.
I agree.
Because you can just go slower, flex harder, stretch
100%.
more. And if I told you to do side raises with 15 pounds, you could go to failure on 10 reps if I said 10.
Yes.
You'll figure out how to go to, or you could do the 60s.
Yep,
right?
Absolutely.
Which one, this is where I go with this with the strength athlete, which one is going to have a higher cost? If all you're trying to do is build the muscle, the 60s.
Absolutely.
Because it's fucking traps, it's erectors, it's all this other shit.
Yes.
Which you should have been training with the deadlift.
Yep. 100%.
So yeah, we're on the
100%.
same page with that.
But
I do like your strategy of doing a lot of sets until you feel it.
Yep.
Right. Then that,
it gives you that positive reinforcement. Right, if you stop that. I also want to mention, towards your point about the progressive resistance not mattering that much, Lyle McDonald has a very good series on his website that explains at kind of a biological level why after you're at an advanced point, progressive resistance isn't that important. And I very much agree with that.
Well,
for bodybuilding. For bodybuilding.
yeah, I mean, there's other ways
Exactly.
that you can add progressive overload.
Squeeze harder, more time under tension, better tempo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody's default is weight. And
Exactly.
it's like, man, it can be rest periods, it can be tempo, it can be a bunch of
The
things.
problem when your only goal is to add more weight to the bar is eventually you are going to end up muscle fucking the thing because you want to put more weight on the bar. That's your measure of success. Weight on the bar has nothing to do with your success in bodybuilding. Absolutely nothing. So, yeah.
Well, that's where it can get dicey. Where if it is trying to be strength, then that's why you should have this, hierarchy of the training day.
Yep.
Or different days for different abilities.
The reason I like different days for different abilities is because I think, and I think most people would agree with this, the more frequently you can train while still recovering, the better your outcomes are going to be. While still recovering is an important part there. If you are training, and let's say the style that John kind of recommended, where he had these sequences of, you would start off with I forget the names that he uses, but essentially you would start off with an exercise, you train it light, you develop that mind-muscle connection, you take that into something heavy, right? Heavier or twitchy, explosive, right? Then you would do another kind of traditional bodybuilding exercise. Maybe this is more the Dorian Yates style, and then you finish with like a metabolic condition, something like that. The general structure of many of John's plans. The problem with that, and that does work for many people. The problem with that is that you are going to have what I call an unpredictable response. So for example, if you're doing this metabolic conditioning, well, the byproducts of this are going to be very different than the byproducts of like heavy training. So here with the metabolic conditioning, primarily the cost that you're paying, that's going to be a lot of glucose, right? And so if you're cutting, that could be a serious problem. If you're bulking, maybe not so much. With the contractile output, right, for that heavy stuff, maybe the biggest price that you're paying is acetylcholine or something like that. That is going to require a different sort of recovery protocol, a different sort of training protocol. And if you're doing them both on the same day, well, A, the recovery cost overall, the absolute cost is going to be higher, but B, and more importantly, you don't know what cost you paid, right? And you're not going to be able to train again productively until you've paid all the cost. But if you do one at a time, right, you say, okay, here is my, kind of my traditional bodybuilding day. I'm going to do high volume, a lot of sets, short rest times, deplete a lot of glycogen, get a sick pump. And then after that, I'm going to get really hot and sweaty and out of breath. And then after that, I'm going to cool down and I'm going to push carbs the rest of the day. And then the next day comes around, you're probably going to feel pretty decent. Maybe you do a little bit of a restorative session. And the day after that, you do a really heavy training day, right? And then, okay, how am I going to pay the cost with this? Well, I got to get really parasympathetic. So maybe I'm going to do like a cold plunge or take a cold shower in the morning, and I'm going to make sure that I do my meditation. Totally different approach to recovery than you used after this glycolytic day. You go through that 3-day sequence, take a day off and you repeat it. In my opinion, you're going to do a heck of a lot better than the person who did day 1, day 2 with a rest day in between, or even day 1, day 2, day 3 with no rest days in between. I think your progress is going to be a lot slower with that latter, just because it's more imprecise. Not necessarily worse, but more imprecise.
Well, in theory, you would be lowering the overall fatigue.
In theory, yes.
The global fatigue, or
Right,
whatever the
right.
name is for that, which in theory, that makes sense because of that. Which I guess in a way, Louis was kind of trying to do that.
Absolutely.
If we
100%.
peel away all the accessory
100%, yeah.
right? If we peel that away, right? Because that gets it foggy. Like the GPP and that.
Foggy, right. Well, so the problem here, right, is Louis had so much tacit knowledge that my guess is, and I never trained with him, my guess is if he came in and he saw you were dragging, well, he's going to change the accessory protocols, right?
Sure.
The problem is people try to generalize this from themselves without that tacit knowledge, and they're like, I got to do my 5x10 for these 4 exercises no matter how I feel. And then, again, you get into that dicey.
No, that's the biggest thing where with the stuff that he was putting out, it's people didn't understand how auto-regulated all those things were, to where if you're beat after the max effort shit, you're basically done, man.
Yep.
There's no point in throwing more gasoline on this fire because you got to be back in on Wednesday to be able to do this again with the upper body, and so all these things were figured out on the fly, which really wasn't. Like, I need to have a GPP day on Tuesday because I feel like shit from Monday, but sometimes I didn't need that.
Right.
So what extra workout should I do? It's like, I don't fucking know.
Exactly.
I'm not you.
Man, and you tell people that, they freak out. They're like, but I got to know.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. Like, if I guessed, I would just as likely make things worse.
See, that's the hardest. And out of everybody I've spoken to, that any strength athlete at the highest level, it all comes down to auto regulation across the board, right? And the trick is, how do you teach somebody that? And I don't know. right? We can have the conversations, but I don't know.
I think Mike Teixeira has done the best job of trying to teach people that, but there's so much information, and it's so complex that I think the problem you run into is paralysis by analysis, right? It's like I got to keep all these, kind of thoughts in mind. It takes away from the actual experience of training, which, for a guy like Mike who's highly analytical, it works. But I think for the average person, it's
No, but he's also controlling a lot of the variables.
a lot of
There's none of the
which,
conditioning that you're talking about. There's
yep,
none of the hyper,
100%.
so it works very, very well, right? But he's basically just taking
Very,
that.
very small subset of people.
Yes. And if people stay with that, what he's doing, and they don't do any extra shit, which, if they're working with him, they're not. But if they're trying to do what he's saying they're doing, they're not doing what he's saying they're doing because they're putting this extra shit in there and then saying it's not working. But, and he's the biggest factor in there, at least for a while, I think it's changed over time, was the bar speed.
Yep.
Was the thing that he's using to be able to kind of regulate that, which is way more than everybody else. I mean, we're relying on whoop rings and stupid shit like that, which are somewhat kind of maybe helpful, right? And I put that in there because it's just a metric, but it doesn't mean shit when you look at how you feel.
In theory, I should be using those. In practice, I can't stand them. I was like, I don't know how valuable this data is. It drives me nuts to have to, self-monitor all the time. Like, I just don't want to know.
Well, I'll track my shit. I use the Apple Watch because I had AFib in the past. So we'll die. So I use the Apple Watch. I use the fucking Oura Ring and the Fitbit's just for steps, really. But I can look at my sleep every night, and it's never the same across all three platforms. It can be off the last night I was off by 2 hours.
I believe it.
Like one's 8 hours and 20 minutes. But at the end of the day, what matters is what do I feel like when I wake up? I feel good today, right? So
absolutely.
All the other shit, and if people let those things dictate how they feel or what their recovery is, they already lost.
The one tool like that I feel is valuable. If you're somebody who really obsesses over rest time, you can get a pulse oximeter, and then you just wait till your oxygen saturation is like 98% before you do your set, and that way you don't have to guess about rest times. That's assuming you have a protocol where the rest is like as needed versus, okay, we're going to do strict 30 or 60 seconds rest or whatever, but sometimes it's warranted.
Have you used it yourself?
A pulse oximeter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I assume you don't use it now because you've realized that your breathing is a good enough gauge for you to be able to.
Right. It's like, I don't need this. I know, I know when I feel ready to go. Yeah. But I've coached some people who just like, I feel like it really comes down to anxiety, right? They got to feel like they're doing everything perfect. And so they don't have that ability to like gauge their breathing. If they try to, they're just going to make themselves nervous. So it can be a useful tool in that regard.
So you have seen it as a tool to be able to teach them
exactly.
Because that's what I'm kind of looking for with this whole auto regulation thing. Like, how can we hack it?
Yeah.
Because I know if you train hard for 10 years, you're going to know.
Exactly. Right.
Or you should, right? Unless
you better. Yeah. Sure.
Well, the ones that don't are the ones that overly rely on a coach to be able to tell them what to do. Then they never change the variables off of their program because coach said, do this, I'm going to do this. Right. Those are the ones that don't learn.
Absolutely. The other category I put in there, a lot of times military guys have been taught it doesn't matter how you feel, you're going to train anyway. And those guys will just ignore the signals I found, which has benefits to some extent. But yeah, for auto
that becomes an interesting one because we can, in that case, or in a lot of the CrossFit athletes as well, you can almost infinitely keep increasing your work capacity, right? If you take a long enough period of time and scale it all up. But the question becomes, is it necessary for what you're doing?
Yeah. And for powerlifting, is it? Probably not.
No, not at all. It all comes down to over a period of time, what's the minimal effective dose?
Yes.
But I don't know if you can determine that if you haven't figured out what the maximal is.
And if you have put in the time and effort to figure out what the maximal is, are you going to be like psychologically satisfied with the minimum? A lot of people aren't.
Yeah, I know, but it's that becomes a dicey area. Is
very.
You want to figure out the maximal when you're at an age where you can get away with it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it changes over time, right?
Yeah. Where if you're trying to figure that out in your mid 30s to mid 45s, then you have some
completely different.
It's a different price to be able to. You can kind of like if you would have dialed back 5 years before you did, you could have got away, right? But you push a little bit. And I don't know if that's training age or if it's biological age. It's probably a combination of both that plays into all that.
I mean, I don't know about forever, but for me, it could have been 18 months. 18 months, I could have dialed it back. I would have been fine. But I couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Were there any topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up?
Boy, no. Nothing that comes to mind.
Do you think because you said you had to pay, you're paying the price, but you also don't know what other debt you have.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah. Do you think it was necessary?
For me personally, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it's like it's ugh, I hate this phrase, but it's almost like beautifully tragic, right? It's like you can look at back in hindsight and be like, I had to go through that in order to get to where I wanted to be. But man, if I didn't have to, if I had just had the mentality where it's like I could have listened to you, I could have listened to Dante, I could have listened to the other guys who were telling me the right things. If I had had that mindset, man, my life could have been not. I don't want to say my life could have been different. I could have gotten here faster.
Mm-hmm.
I could have gotten here faster.
Well, that's a good option because I'd answer the same way, but sometimes when I answer that same way, I ask myself, am I just coping to my own bias bullshit?
Very, very possible, right?
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, is this really true? And you kind of, it's fucked up because you kind of go back and
it
forth.
really is.
Because the fact of the matter is you can't change it.
But
right.
At the same time, it's like, I had so many valuable experiences. I had so many days where I would just like sit outside and be like, this is better than anything I'd ever dreamed of, right? It's like, okay, so if the cost for that was like 5 years of your life, isn't that worth it? To me, it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Well, while it can't be changed, right? Because the past is the past. Right. You can help others to not go through the same thing.
Yes.
And the way I've wrapped my head around that, because you can get frustrated with the number of people that you tell that don't listen. But I think if they got a true meathead personality, it's going to take, I'm just going to make a number up, 2,000 times for them to hear that thing. And if I was the 300th and the 400th, then I did my part.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Somebody later would, but it's still going to take that many times. It's not going to be 1, it's not going to be 10, it's not going to be 100. It's going to be some number. And somebody at some point is going to make that last one. But without all those other ones laying the foundation for that, it would never hold.
I do want to say, this is going to sound like I'm kissing your ass, and I'm not. We had that conversation yesterday where you called yourself like a B-level lifter, which I assume is because you didn't set a world record, or whatever, win a meet you wanted to win, something like that. But I do think, and I was thinking about this the other day, I think you have probably brought more people to the sport than any other human being ever, right? And to me, and I can say this, right, because I've been on both sides, to me, that is more valuable than setting the world record or, lifting the weight that you want to lift or winning the meet that you wanted to lift, right? I think the people who can say that type of thing and look back in hindsight, you are going to be a lot more fulfilled and a lot more satisfied than the people who chase numbers their whole career.
Yeah, but the ego's not.
Really?
Fucking world record would have been nice.
Would have been nice. Sure. Like, I get that. Interesting.
Well, you've had one.
I've had one and I've had a pro card, and I can tell you, man, the day after was really nice. The day after you can sit back and be like, I'm the shit. And that was fun. But it lasts about 36 hours.
Yeah, that's probably the same as any PR.
Yep.
The takeaway that I have from all that is there was a point with my squat I was close, like 50 pounds away. And had I not been so fucked up, right, physically, and it would have had 2 more years, right, because 2 more years would be 4 more meets. Out of 4 meets, you're going to have one that's going to go fairly well. Maybe 3 more years, like 6 meets, you're going to have one that's going to go the way you want. Then it might have been there, but the numbers still are going up after all that anyhow. But the point that I take away from all that is if I can help somebody else get those additional 3 years on that peak, right? Because that's really what it comes down to is, a lot of the ones that get to that point but just aren't there may have been there if they had 2 more healthy years on the peak. But at a certain point, you just start getting worse, more and more beat up, and you just go, and you keep staying because nobody's there to tell you not, right? Until you just can't. And that's a big thing, right? A big thing because you get to a certain point, I don't know if we actually get stronger. We just display our strength more effectively.
Better, yeah.
Right? And if you only had a year, 2 years to be able to do that, that's not enough opportunities to really show what's there, right? And you can go back through, oh man, Henry Thompson, I think, was the one that had more meets than anybody I've ever seen. You go to his open powerlifting, you're like it's like 300 fucking meets, man. And you go through there and you try to find the ones that were like spectacular days. It's not what people think, man. They think every meet's going to be the best one.
the 2017 US Open. The goal was obviously to win, but the second goal was like, let's pull 800 at 181 because that would have been the world record at the time. And in training, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks out, I had doubled 770 and it was easy. Like it was legitimately easy. It looked like I had five. So that was the goal. And I'd won the meet on my second deadlift, right? So that was on the table. And so we call 800 for the third. And I can still remember, like, I can relive that moment, like just close my eyes, right? Like, and I had that bar halfway up and it was moving. And then all of a sudden my grip is just gone. And like, it's not even like I have a chance to squeeze harder. All of a sudden it's just gone. And I still think if I had made that lift, I probably would have retired right then. I would have just walked away. I've been like, look, this was the perfect meet. I got as strong as I needed to get. I'm done. I'm going to step back. And just was it.
To go back to what you were saying about when I sidetracked it with my ego, I agree with what you're saying with that, but the thing that's more fulfilling than what I've been able to pull more people in the sport or being able to help is I've been doing this shit for so long now that the people that I've helped or helped give a platform to, yourself, for example, then you're helping all these other people. And now it's gotten to a point where eventually, and it's already happened several times, I'm going to have somebody on the podcast that you helped.
That'd be cool.
Right. And they're going to say that, Ben completely changed my whole, and it's like, fuck, man. So that's moving. It's the live, learn, pass on. It's moving through multiple factions. I had a strength coach on a few weeks ago that learned a whole lot from Brandon Smitley, and it's like, fuck, so that's the most fulfilling part, is that because when I first got into all this and going back to the whole history thing, what I feared about, this is crazy. What I feared about the internet, right? Because it was dial up and shit like back then, is after a couple of years being online, and this would be like 2000 or something like that, I'd start seeing people selling programs and all this other stuff. And it's like, man, granted I had to buy the magazine, but people could get strong just by other people helping them to get strong.
Yep.
And I started to see this whole thing start to emerge. Like, well, what's the person that has no money? Like, how are they going to be able to learn how to get strong if everybody's behind a paywall and all this other kind of stuff back then? And it's like, well, I'll just give it all for free, then hopefully be able to pay for it because of product sales and all that, but keep it so everybody would have access to that moving forward. And that was a general concern, but it didn't happen that way. It actually worked out opposite of what I thought, to where, there was a time in the online coaching, all of us were like just bashing the shit out of that because of this same reason. But then what you find out over a period of time is the online coaches, to be able to get their clients, have to put out really good content for free to be able to get the clients. And that content is better than the content that a lot of other people are putting out. So it actually is a net positive, hugely, way more than what I originally intended, because that fear, of everything kind of goes into that whole thing. And it keeps happening now to where, we'll make fun of the Instagram influencers and all the other kind of stuff, but they're still garnering attention, which is going to be a net positive over a period of time, even though what they say half the time is bullshit. But that's not new. That's not new. That was in the magazines. Absolutely. That was in the shitty programs that were being sold way back
in 1900.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Tell me I'm wrong, but nothing's changed. You studied all this.
There is a magazine from the late 1800s that is advertising a training program, and the models, the photographs in the program have been whatever the most primitive version of Photoshop was, where they, actually had people alter the photos with like a paintbrush so that this person looks super jacked when they're not. And that's what they used to sell the programs originally. And it's a double-edged sword, right? There's a better term for that, but it's like, okay, well, we're feeding into people's insecurities by telling them they need to look like this, but we're also getting them to exercise, right? And so is it a net positive? In my opinion, yes, it absolutely is. Absolutely is.
Well, what I wonder is, when you go back then and there's, say, propaganda or whatever we want to say, it was gate kept. There were only a couple magazines that were being able to put it out. So it was never challenged because it was in there, to where now it's all still the same, but it's not gate kept. It's way more vast,
right?
Way more acceptable, but because it's not gate kept, I see that as a positive too, because you can see the people will get called out.
I don't think that's unique to our industry, though. I think that's
Yeah,
everything. Oh yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
I
Where,
I don't know if that's positive or negative. I have no idea. I hope it's positive. Um, I really don't know. I
yeah.
really don't know.
Yeah. I don't, I go back and forth,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely,
Because what's the
absolutely.
alternative? You just stifle all of it and you go back to where there's only 3 people that are
There,
allowed to put out
yeah,
that.
that's not it's not reasonable, right? It's saying like you can go back and change the past. You can't, right? It
Yeah.
is what it is. You got to accept that. But there's always going to be that nostalgia for the way things were when we when
Hmm.
I started and when you
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just the nature of progress.
Hmm. But it's progress, but it's the same. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
absolutely I
It's
do.
the same thing.
Progress isn't the right term, growth, right? And it's
Growth.
like, okay, are you growing in the way you want to grow, or are you growing like a cancer? It's hard to tell.
Hmm. How can people go about finding you?
Oh, PH Deadlift on Instagram, and that's kind of about it. You can email me, Ben at phdeadlift.com.
All right, that works. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I really appreciate you having me, man. It's been a blast. I've had a great conversation here, but then also a great trip, great weekend. Everybody who's been so welcoming to me. I've met with Broderick Chavez when I started. I trained with Charlie. I've had a really great time, and I'm looking forward to keeping it up.
Yeah, thank you. I've
Yeah,
been looking forward to this one for a while.
awesome.
So we're done.